I'm the highest civilization in the universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101, An Insect. At the entrance of the passage dozens of meters high of the meteorite column, Li Ming stood quietly, looking into the distance. After taking a deep breath, he suddenly stood up and jumped directly down. From high to low, use energy to reduce the gravity of full star, so that the body can fall at a constant speed. In the eyes of powerful spiritual civilization or high-level civilization, the gravity of the planet can be partially changed by using energy, and doing so can completely avoid the risk of falling to the ground by gravity. Just as Li Ming was watching the situation on the ground with peace of mind, a sharp sound of kai kai suddenly entered his ears. This sound was not as loud as a thunderous roar, but it was like a needle prick, as if someone was stabbing his ears with a sharp object, and the tingling sensation immediately spread throughout the brain. Oh my god, what is this sound? Li Ming hurriedly covered his ears with both hands, and looked up to see a 1 meter long and wide flying insect heading straight for Li Ming in the distance. As soon as he saw this unknown alien insect, Li Ming immediately looked terrified. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened a little wider. Mo, who also noticed the alien insect, directly raised his wings, as if he had been electrocuted. His eyes were as big as lanterns, his sharp mouth opened, and he made a clucking sound. His feet kicked wildly and kept kicking. Swish, swish, swish. Li Ming only felt a burning pain on his face. He turned his head and saw Mo's chicken claws kicking around, and his fingertips kept scratching his face. After a while of kicking, Mo flapped his wings and jumped off Li Ming's shoulder and ran straight down. Fuck you, Li Ming shouted angrily, but he could no longer care about Mo. He stared at the flying insect with his eyes fixed, and a countermeasure immediately came into his mind. The flying insect looked a bit like a mosquito, but it was huge, with a long mouth like a sharp blade, 2 pairs of wings flapping quickly, and 4 legs were covered with bone spurs. A pair of glasses like light bulbs stared at Li Ming closely. Li Ming had already sensed the opponent's attack. In the air, Li Ming immediately mobilized all the energy in his body to stop reducing the gravity of full star. This action also caused Li Ming's body to suddenly increase in weight, changing from a slow fall to a fast fall. With such an acceleration, Li Ming's body seemed to be pulled by someone and disappeared on the spot with a whoosh. This also made the flying insect miss its attack. The long blade-pointed mouth pierced from the previous position of Li Ming and almost hit the meteorite column. After dodging the attack, Li Ming breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Mo. His white body fell to the ground like a free-falling stone. Compared with Mo, Li Ming used energy to speed up his falling speed, like a meteor rushing to the ground at a high speed. The super-fast speed directly surpassed Mo before, and he was the first to enter the meteorite group on the ground. Mo only saw a black shadow flash by and fall to the ground. He turned his head and found that Li Ming was gone. However, the flying insect turned around in the air, and swooped down towards Mo. Cack, clack, clack. Mo screamed again, and his wings and legs were straight, as if they were cramped. In shock, his eyes suddenly opened wide again, as if they were about to bulge out of his eye sockets. Then his wings flapped quickly, and his feet kicked wildly, as if he was about to land quickly. However, no matter how hard Mo tried, he could not match the speed of the flying insect. Its sword-like beak stabbed at Mo. Oh my god. Help. Mo looked back and screamed in despair. Only Li Ming, who had spiritual civilization, could understand the chicken cry. Dang, a metal collision sound was heard, as if 2 iron plates collided with each other. A grey figure flashed. Li Ming held Mo in his arms with one hand, and with the other hand, he held the grey tacky long sword in front of him, and collided with the flying insect's long sword-like mouth. With a sudden force on his right arm, the flying insect was deflected, and his body fell back to the ground. As soon as his feet touched the ground, Li Ming did not relax at all, and his eyes narrowed slightly to look at the flying insects in the sky. The rescued Mer breathed a sigh of relief in Li Ming's arms, but his face immediately changed, and he became angry, looking at the flying insects in the sky with angry eyebrows. Damn it. Want to kill me? Mer's body surface was red, and the halo quickly enveloped the objects within a dozen meters around it, forming a circular red light phantom. The next moment, Mer suddenly kicked his feet and rushed out of Li Ming's arms and flew into the air, and the flying insect was not afraid at all and rushed towards Mer again with its sharp mouth. Li Ming looked worried when he saw this. Just when he was about to do something, he suddenly stopped where he was. He saw the shadows around Mer suddenly turned into a big red hand, which grabbed the flying insect. Although this big red hand had no physical attack ability, the flying insect's originally dark eyes suddenly glowed red after it was grasped. Then the body suddenly stopped attacking and just flapped its wings in the air without any movement. Li Ming looked carefully. The shadow and red light were Mer's spiritual ability Hukang. The flying insect had no intention of attacking and was like a docile pet, standing still in the air without moving. However, Mer obviously had no intention of giving up. He flew directly to the flying insect. "I'll let you kill me. I'll let you kill me. I'll let you kill me," he shouted while grabbing the flying insect's back with his feet, flapping his wings, and occasionally pecking at the flying insect with his sharp beak. The debris flew all over the back of the flying insect, but only some of the epidermis was injured. Although Mer was already exhausted and panting, the flying insect did not suffer any substantial damage. Li Ming smiled lightly and shook his head gently, but suddenly frowned and narrowed his eyes after watching casually. "Red eyes," Li Ming whispered to himself. This pair of red eyes was not unfamiliar. When he first entered the forest, the male-tailed beasts that besieged Li Ming all had red eyes. Later, they were forced back by Li Ming's taming ability and their eyes returned to their original color. In addition, the red light emitted by the trunk of the vine tree was exactly the same. So it seems that Mer, the star beast, is causing trouble. Li Ming seemed to have guessed something, but his expression was calm, and he did not show any abnormality. After all, he was still in the cooperation period with the star beast, and everything would be decided after getting the insect flower fruit. Mer struggled on the back of the flying insect for a long time in the air, and only after he was completely exhausted did he slowly fly down and land on Li Ming's shoulder again. "Okay, let's go." Mer lay on Li Ming's shoulder and said quietly. Li Ming snorted lightly, without saying anything more, raised his right hand, collected Hulong, and then continued to walk deep into the meteorite area. Chapter 102, Deep in the Wormhole. At the top of the Bryan Hall, dozens of Florence people gathered together. They lined up neatly and were evenly divided into 4 groups. In front of each group stood a 6th level mentor. Those standing in a neat line were all 4th level civilizations. They were all wearing fixed armor and holding sharp weapons in their hands. They were the soldiers of the 4 major races of Florence. 4 high priests stood in front of these troops and arranged something. After you 4 mentors lead the troops into the wild forest, there is only one goal: to capture all the Faizy people alive. If there are stubborn resistance, kill them without mercy. Lamont stood at the front, looking at the many soldiers, and continued, "Now the people who are operating the magic cave have basically arrived near the magic cave. The coordinates and specific locations of the Faizy people have been marked. After you are teleported there, you must try your best to avoid the wild beasts and capture all the Faizy people alive." "Yes," the 4 6th level mentors and soldiers said almost at the same time. "Action." Lamont gave a stern order. Many soldiers then came to the teleportation array. 4 6th level instructors immediately operated the array to start it. Suddenly, the light flashed, and a layer of light curtain enveloped all the soldiers. When the light curtain faded, the instructors and soldiers all disappeared. Lamont nodded with satisfaction. At the same time, he turned his eyes and glanced at the other 3 high priests, saying, "The results of the demon cave operation will be out soon. Let's prepare for the operation." Odin smiled lightly and stepped forward and said, "Our main purpose is to capture wild beasts and prepare for the falling rice gate. As for how many people can return from this demon cave operation, it is still uncertain." "Odin, what do you mean by this? Do you mean that you alien races have given up on the insects, flowers and fruits this time?" Norma stepped forward, looked at Odin, and said unhappily. Odin's expression suddenly hardened a little, and he turned back to look at the other party and replied, "Norma, don't misinterpret my meaning casually. The distribution of the worm flower fruit depends on the final result. I just made the worst plan, but I didn't say I wouldn't participate in the distribution. Okay. The distribution of the worm flower fruit depends on the final result. As long as there are disciples who can get it, no matter which tribe they are from, we will take them back this time. If not, we will capture some wild beasts and return quickly. Lamont said this with an expression of indifference. On the surface, he didn't care, but Lamont's tone seemed to be confident. Because at this time Lamont knew very well that, whether the worm flower fruit could be obtained or not, it would be controlled by the falling rice gate in the future. The Death Medicine clan held the key to the falling rice gate of Xenia. If the other 3 tribes wanted to participate in the falling rice gate, they would naturally not be able to do so without paying some benefits. If they really get the worm fruit, with Xenia as a bargaining chip, the Death Medicine clan has a greater chance of getting the worm fruit. Although this confidence was not fully revealed, everyone present knew it. Berg, who had not spoken for a long time, stood up and said, Archpriest Lamont is right. We should get ready and set off. The worm fruit will naturally depend on the results. That's right. Alden followed closely and echoed. At this time, Norma showed a strange expression, looked at Berg not far away, and couldn't help but secretly said, for the gate of falling rice, Berg, who has always been taciturn, actually has to maintain Lamont. Thinking of this, Norma had to say, High Priest Lamont is right, we are ready to leave now. So saying, the 3 of them were ready to walk towards the teleportation array, but Lamont still stood there motionless, looking at the 3 people who were ready to leave, and said, Don't worry, the troops who arrested Fazy people have just set off, we can wait a while. As soon as these words came out, the 3 of them stopped in their original places. If it were normal, the minority would obey the majority, and the 3 priests who had already set off would not have to pay attention to Lamont, but it was different now. Lamont's words made the 3 of them stop. After all, the number of places for the gate of falling rice was limited. But if they listened to Lamont's meaning and gave in, they would not only show weakness, but also lower their status. After all, they were all high priests in the same clan. Although they were unwilling, the 3 looked at each other, and their eyes showed a bit of embarrassment. For the quota of the falling rice gate, humiliation seemed to be unimportant. Alden was the first to give in, gritted his teeth and injured it, forced to turn around and smiled, but just when he was about to say something, Norma spoke first. I think so too. Those instructors and soldiers have just left for a short time. If we rush over now, we will alarm those high-level wild beasts, which will be very disadvantageous for capturing the Fixie people. Norma suddenly spoke first, which surprised Berg and Alden. Norma didn't care, and turned back to his original position. Alden looked at Norma with surprise, but didn't say much at the moment, just smiled lightly. Seeing the 3 people return, Lamont's mouth corners slightly raised, showing satisfaction and a proud expression. Regardless of whether the 3 people in front of him really obeyed, Lamont, as a member of the Death Medicine clan, must take this opportunity to destroy the prestige of the other 3 clans. At this moment, the skylight was in the middle of the sky, and the temperature rose sharply, just like a hot summer day. One could even see the fluctuations in the air under the high temperature. This kind of weather is just the most ordinary day on Philistar. There is no season, and it is like this almost every day. Li Ming is now slowly approaching the central magic cave area, with the Hulang sword in his hand, and there are more and more Zerg around him. The red light of Mori appeared, like a burning flame, and a bit like a demon from hell, continuing to cover the area of more than 10 meters around. The magic cave is located in the central area of the meteorite area. The meteorites here are relatively dense, but not big. The largest one is only 7 or 8 meters high. Most of them are 2 or 3 meters high, standing on the ground like stone pillars. It looks like entering a stone forest. There is one every 10 meters. At the same time, a pungent smell keeps coming towards you. The deeper you go, the stronger the smell is, making people want to vomit. Li Ming didn't know how long he had been walking, but his steps were getting slower and slower. He even had to look at the gravel on the ground when he stepped on it. It was no wonder that Li Ming was so cautious, because there were all kinds of strange insects everywhere. These strange insects were similar in size. The largest was no more than 2 meters, and the smallest was only about 1 meter. They were almost exactly the same in appearance, with a long sword-like mouth in front of their heads, a body like a mantis, and thin and long limbs covered with bone spurs. The only difference was that those that were only about 1 meter in size basically had 2 pairs of wings, just like the flying insects that Li Ming had encountered before, while those that were larger in size had no wings, but their limbs were relatively sturdy. The hot weather seemed to have some kind of inhibitory effect on these insects. When Li Ming saw them, all the insects curled up in the shadow of the meteorite and did not move, as if they were taking a nap or hibernating. However, the number was astonishing, almost one next to another, densely packed, countless, and those flying insects were tightly lying on the back of the stone, piling up layer by layer. Just looking at it made people's scalp tingle and feel uncomfortable. In order not to alarm these insects, Li Ming could only keep his steps as light as possible and move forward slowly. The hulang in his right hand kept loosening and holding it again. The nervousness could no longer be concealed. Not only Li Ming, but even more was trembling on Li Ming's shoulder, carefully controlling his red phantom to prevent accidents. Li Ming was cautious this time, but his eyes were fixed on the front. An irregular circular area had appeared more than 10 meters away. Here is the insect nest. Li Ming aimed at the area in front of him, and his eyes quickly locked on a certain place. His face changed slightly, and he actually showed a hint of smile. Chapter 103 Two Fruits. The diameter of the entire area is only a few dozen meters, and the outer periphery is a ring of black matter. These black substances are nothing but those alien insects, but they are all dead Zerg corpses. Some have wings, and some do not. The area is full of them, but the accumulation of corpses is not in the shape of a mountain, but parallel to the ground. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and he could see very clearly that, although the corpses of these insects seemed to be spread flat on the ground, it was not the case. The ring area was obviously dug by these insects, and then the insect corpses were deliberately dragged into it. The insect corpses liquefied after decaying, and then slowly accumulated. After a long period of accumulation, they gradually became level with the ground. This made it seem that there were not many corpses, but as long as they were sensed, the corpses buried underground would be detected. It was not the unique ability of Li Ming's wisdom eyes that could detect these, but these liquefied corpses also contained this powerful energy, making the entire ring of insect corpses in the area like an energy ring. Of course, what caught Li Ming's attention was not the energy emitted by these insect corpses, but the strange plants growing on them. These plants were only about 1 meter high, with black branches and dark green leaves. They were plants that Li Ming had never seen since he entered the forest. See, those growing on the insect corpses are insect flower fruit trees. More saw Li Ming's gaze and said consciously, "Insect flower fruit trees?" Li Ming looked at them carefully with his eyes fixed. Li Ming had never seen such a small fruit tree before. It looked like a seedling, not to mention any fruit. Moore nodded slightly and continued, "Yes, this kind of tree can only grow on insect corpses. The level of fruits grown on insect corpses of different levels is also different. For low-level creatures like you, the effect of this fruit is already very powerful." Li Ming no longer cared about Moore on his shoulder. He stared at the insect flower fruit trees with his eyes, like a scanner, checking all the insect flower fruits one by one. His eyes moved slightly, and when he saw a certain insect flower fruit tree, he suddenly paused and opened his eyes a little wider. That insect flower fruit tree was no different from other insect flower fruit trees, except that this tree had an extra white fruit. "What is that?" Li Ming suddenly whispered, as if he had discovered some treasure. His emotions also became a little nervous. His excited figure could not help but move with it, and he took a step directly. This step happened to step on a meteorite, and there was a slight crunch sound, and the sound of meteorites colliding with each other was heard. The sound was very weak, and it would be insignificant if it were normal, but with alien insects all around, this slight sound was like thunder, which directly blew the nerves of Li Ming and Moore, and both the man and the bird were nervous. The alien insects around suddenly squirmed, and the alien insects lying on the meteorites also spread their wings, but these movements only lasted for 1 or 2 seconds, before returning to normal, as if the alien insects were just stretching. Li Ming breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. However, Moore was furious. He flapped his wings fiercely on Li Ming's head and scolded, "Be careful." Look at you. You are so ignorant. Li Ming was furious. He turned his head and glared at Me. He was about to lose his temper but held back. His anger was forcibly suppressed. Obviously, any wrong move at this time would be fatal. Adjusting his breathing and recovering his emotions, Li Ming turned his attention to the insect flower fruit tree again. The white one is the insect flower fruit, Me said softly. Li Ming had already seen this and naturally did not need the other party to remind him. He said nothing and did not even look at Me. He raised his feet and slowly moved towards the center. The closer you get to this area, the more pungent the strong smell becomes. At the same time, there are more and more alien insects around. Most of the alien insects hide under meteorites or in places where they are not directly exposed to the light. Only a few alien insects are exposed to the sun. Li Ming has fully opened the ability of the wisdom eye. The powerful consciousness covers this part of the area. As long as there is an abnormality in an alien insect, Li Ming can immediately detect it. Although Li Ming has spiritual civilization, he is still lacking in the cultivation of the star of the sixth domain star. The powerful consciousness shadow released by Moore is beyond Li Ming's reach. It can be seen that the status of star beasts in the universe is extraordinary. Continuing to move forward slowly, Li Ming has come to the edge of the magic cave, and the entire magic cave is in sight. The most central area of the magic cave is a piece of red land. In the middle of this land stands a crystal block more than 1 meter high. The shape of the crystal block is an irregular oval, and there is also a red sphere the size of an egg on the top. Li Ming's face changed slightly when he saw the crystal block. This crystal block looks so familiar. Li Ming thought carefully and looked at the crystal block again. At the same time, he soon noticed the red thing on the top of the crystal block. Insect core. It's an insect core. Moore suddenly opened his eyes wide and shouted excitedly, flapping his wings. Li Ming turned his eyes to the side, glanced at Moore with his peripheral vision, and looked at the crystal block again. At this time, Li Ming suddenly remembered something. That crystal block. Could it be the same as the one on Little Flame Star? Li Ming thought to himself again. His eyes narrowed slightly. Just as Li Ming guessed, the bottom of this crystal block was connected to the red land, just like a fruit growing from the ground. This sign was similar to the crystal blocks on Little Flame Star. Looking at the red sphere on the top of the crystal block, although it was only the size of an egg, its appearance and aura were very similar to the one Li Ming got from Little Flame Star. In the deep cave of Little Flame Star, there was an ice layer blood pool. In the middle of the blood pool was an object 1 foot high, similar to an insect egg, and it was huge. Li Ming also took great efforts to pull it out of the ice layer. Although the one in front of him was only the size of an egg, its appearance and aura were very similar to the one Li Ming got. The bottom of this thing was connected to the crystal block, and the crystal block was full of blood threads, like roots, as if this small red object grew on the crystal block. From Moore's mouth, we can know that this red thing is the insect core. My insect core. Me suddenly cried out, flapping his wings and flying over. Li Ming was about to stop him, but Me had already flown far away, heading straight for the crystal block. MD. This guy. And he said I had never seen the world. Li Ming frowned and quickly looked at the alien insects around him, fearing that Me's actions would wake up the alien insects. Me flew for a while and landed on the crystal stone, opening his mouth and eyes wide, and hugged the red ball tightly with his wings, as if he was going to pull it out. Me gritted his teeth, stepped hard on the crystal block with his claws, and used his wings like his hands to pull the insect core off the crystal block, and kept making various low cries from his mouth. Moore was so immersed in the insect core that he had already forgotten the surrounding environment. However, Li Ming was furious at this moment. If this continued, it would only be a matter of time before the alien insects were awakened. Most importantly, if this insect core was really the same as the one Li Ming had obtained on the Little Flame Star, then once it was pulled out, the consequences would be disastrous. Thinking about it, Li Ming felt scared and did not dare to think about it anymore. He even had plans to retreat. However, he glanced at the corner of his eye and saw that the white insect flower fruit was already within reach. Wouldn't it be a failure to retreat at this time? Thinking of this, Li Ming no longer cared about Moore and quickly stepped forward to the insect corpse. As long as he got the insect flower fruit, Li Ming's trip would not be in vain, and he could forget about everything else. On the pile of insect corpses, in addition to the hard insect bones, there was also completely rotten flesh. 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow. Li Ming had to use energy to reduce the weight of his body so that he could continue to walk on it. Carefully bypassing these plants, he came to the tree with the insect flower fruit. He looked up and looked around. The alien insects seemed to be still asleep. More was still chirping and pulling out the insect core. Everything seemed very calm. Li Ming stretched out his right hand, gently held the white fruit with 3 fingers, and then pulled it hard. The fruit rolled directly into Li Ming's palm. The whole thing was pure white, with a bit of transparency. The size was similar to that of an ordinary jujube. The energy contained in it could be clearly sensed. At the same time, a wonderful breath continued to overflow from the fruit. The breath was very obvious, fresh and natural. It completely covered the stench of the corpse insects, making people feel refreshed and comfortable. Li Ming raised the corner of his mouth, revealing a slight smile. At the same time, he clenched his right palm and put the fruit into the star capsule. After getting the insect flower fruit, Li Ming's trip could be said to be a success. Now all he had to do was to get out of here. Turning around, Li Ming looked at Me, who was still struggling to pull out the insect core. He snorted and decided to ignore him and retreat first. However, just as he took a step, an object suddenly appeared not far in front of him. Insect flower fruit? Another one. Li Ming was surprised. His eyes were shining, his tongue was choking, and he couldn't believe it was real. He looked around again and sensed with his powerful consciousness. The alien insects were still sleeping, and no more insect flower fruits were found, but the one in front of him was only 2 steps away from Li Ming. Since he came here, he might as well take them all. Thinking of this, Li Ming took a few steps forward and reached out to grab the white fruit. Li Ming was already satisfied with getting one, but he didn't expect there would be an unexpected surprise. But just when Li Ming's fingers just touched the fruit, a figure suddenly appeared next to the meteorite not far away. Chapter 104, The Awakened Zerg. Stop. A loud shout came, and the figure of Hamidon appeared not far from the pile of insect corpses. He stared at Li Ming with his eyes, and pointed his finger at this side. With this shout, the sleeping alien insects began to stir. Some turned their heads, some stretched their limbs, and some spread their wings completely. Obviously, the insect swarm has been awakened. Seeing this, Li Ming immediately tensed up his nerves. His face turned pale in an instant, and his whole body seemed to be petrified and stiff in place. His eyes turned around and scanned all the alien insects. He thought to himself, it's over. Although he was afraid in his heart, his hand sped up and directly picked the white insect flower fruit and hurriedly put it away. At this time, Hamidon was in a mess. He immediately regretted the shout he had just made. He looked around in panic. His eyes widened, his mouth opened wide, and his limbs trembled. Hotye, who was traveling with Hamidon, didn't know where he was, but Hamidon was completely terrified at this time. Even Mer on the crystal block stopped moving, but when he noticed the constantly moving Zerg around him, Mer suddenly gritted his teeth and kicked his feet wildly. His wings flapped even harder, his eyebrows furious, and his wings flapped even more frantically. His intention was obviously to pull out the Zerg core before the Zerg fully awakened and became active. With a light pop, Mer's figure rolled from the crystal to the ground. When he stood up, the Zerg core was already in the arms of his wings. Got it. Got it. Ha 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 ha. Mer laughed excitedly and exclaimed. But at this moment, the giant Zerg had already surrounded him, and at the same time, the winged flying insects also filled the sky. Looking up, there were countless black spots everywhere in the sky, which were all those flying insects. And all around the ground, densely packed, one next to another, were all those Zerg that could not fly. In the air and underground, the magic cave was completely surrounded in the middle. With this density, escape was almost impossible. At this time, Moore had lost the excitement of getting the insect core. His whole body was trembling slightly, as if he couldn't even hold the insect core. After all, the insect core is a core item of the Zerg. Without the insect core, the Zerg will inevitably go into a violent state, and the consequences can be said to be disastrous. Most of the alien insects in the air cast fierce eyes on Moore. Of course, with so many alien insects, Li Ming and Han Midun could not escape. Seeing this, Mo's eyes were fierce and his eyebrows were raised. He took the insect core and scratched the ground with a pair of chicken claws. The figure rushed towards Li Ming like an arrow. Help! Help! Ah! Mo shouted. His eyes were wide and round, as if tears were about to fall out, and a pair of chicken claws scratched the sand on the ground more than half a meter high, and a pair of wings kept flapping. Cluck! Cluck! Cluck, accompanied by the sound of chickens. It moved towards Li Ming frantically. Li Ming didn't care about Mo at all. He only felt a buzzing sound in his ears. All the insects swarmed in the air and underground. At the critical moment, the red light outside Mo's body suddenly became stronger. Li Ming's body flashed white light. The grey sword and armor were all attached to his body and hands. The man and the bird began to fight together. Mo's red shadow has a strong consciousness control ability. Any creature that comes into contact will be directly dominated by this consciousness. Once an alien insect is controlled, those controlled alien insects will automatically attack other alien insects. Crack, crack. Various sounds continued. The black mass of alien insects pressed up like a dark cloud. The insect corpses kept falling from the sky. Li Ming waved his sword to resist, while using the armor on his body to defend. Although these alien insects are only first level strength, their number is amazing. If it were a high level civilization, it might be able to deal with it, but a low level civilization is obviously not enough to cope with it. With his powerful consciousness, Mer managed to prop up a small space. The amount of alien insects that can be controlled by consciousness is determined by mental strength and energy. As a star beast, it is very rare to reach this level. However, Mer's control ability is limited. Even if he can prop up a space, there will still be many alien insects breaking through and rushing into it. Those that break through will naturally be dealt with by Li Ming. The seemingly seamless close cooperation is actually full of loopholes. The huge number is shrinking this space with an overwhelming advantage. Although Li Ming has been fighting hard, there are still many insect mouths and legs attacking his body. He relies on the hard armor to defend himself. However, Li Ming is very clear that, if he continues like this, he will be buried here sooner or later. Damn it. When are you willing to take action? Mer shouted loudly, unable to bear it. This roar was extremely clear in the buzzing of insects, but it also made Li Ming feel puzzled. Fuck you. Can't you see I'm trying my best? Li Ming roared back. Indeed, Li Ming was already in a panic, waving the Hutaki sword in his hand continuously, using all his strength. But Mer gritted his teeth, glared at Li Ming fiercely, and said, "Is this called trying your best? Is this how a 5th tier Stardust weapon is used?" Speaking of this, Mer's face suddenly changed, showing a bit of paleness, and he stared at Li Ming with wide eyes. His whole body was slightly stiff, and his mouth trembled as he said, "You can't use the Stardust weapon." Li Ming paused after hearing this, and looked at the Hulang in his hand. He didn't quite understand Mer's intention, but after looking at him with strange eyes, he said doubtfully, "What do you mean? Am I not using it?" Mer sighed in frustration after hearing this, and said nothing with angry eyes. He could only mutter in his heart, "This idiot. If I had known earlier, I would have counted on him to protect me. Now I can only rely on myself to save my life." After muttering like this, Mer already had some plans. Although Li Ming didn't know what the other party was thinking, he still sensed something was wrong, and then asked, "What do you mean by that? What do you mean? Don't you know that Stardust weapons have unique abilities? It's too late to say anything now. I don't want to die here with you, stupid low-level creature." Moore said this, and suddenly a red light appeared on the surface of his body. These red light phantoms twisted and turned, turning into a giant red bird. The red bird instantly covered the nearby area, with 3 long tails and a pair of wings, just like a phoenix. Woo. The giant bird actually made a long cry. Although the phantom could be seen and not touched, the sound of the phoenix was a real sound, which went straight through the ears, and penetrated the entire brain. What the hell is this? Li Ming was amazed at this, but before Li Ming could do anything, the bird suddenly flew up, and in almost the blink of an eye, the red light rushed straight into the sky, like a red arrow rushing into the sky, and disappeared. The red bird disappeared, and Moore also disappeared immediately. Only then did Li Ming understand that this Moore had fought hard and escaped alone. As soon as more disappeared, the red lights also disappeared. Without the resistance of the red lights, the alien insects poured down without any resistance, and instantly engulfed Li Ming like a flood. At this time, more was falling from a high altitude, like a free fall, falling into the dense forest below. The energy is almost exhausted, and there is no strength left. Fortunately, my life was saved. Moore breathed a long sigh of relief, no longer caring about where his body was, and let it fall down. And right below Moore's fall, a high-level alien was binding a bone wolf with a green light. This alien was Lamont. In addition to the bone wolf being bound, there was also a wild beast that looked like a pig and a rabbit behind him. The wild beast that looked like a pig was slightly larger, 2 meters long, and 1 meter high, while the rabbit was smaller, only about 2 feet high. These two were the wild beasts captured by Lamont. Green light continued to shoot out from his right hand, and the beam of light was like a rope, with the other end encircling the head of the bone wolf. The bone wolf was at level 3, while pigs and rabbits were only at level 2, so the difficulty of capturing them was naturally very different. The bone wolf had a hard exoskeleton, and its fur and meat were protected by the skeleton. It was extremely ferocious and a lone beast. Looking at the bone wolf that was about to be captured, Lamont smiled with relief. After capturing this bone wolf, the 4 will be complete. Lamont muttered to himself with satisfaction. The eyes of the bone wolf were originally fierce, but under the restraint of the green light, the eyes gradually softened, and at the same time, the white eyes began to flash green light. Once it turned green, it meant that the capture was successful. Lamont's mouth corners rose, and a smile almost appeared, but before Lamont could smile, a massive white object suddenly fell from the sky. A loud bang sounded, and dust and smoke enveloped the entire area. Chapter 105. Escape is the most important thing. The dust slowly dissipated, and a deep pit appeared on the ground. The bone wolf disappeared, and at the bottom of the pit lay a hairless white chicken, which was Moore. But at this time, Moore's body collapsed to the ground, with a pair of wings lying softly on the ground, a pair of claws standing straight, and one of the toes was still trembling slightly. Next to the pit, Lamont was staring at Moore in the pit. His face was extremely ugly. He looked around, and found that the bone wolf that was about to be in his hand had already disappeared. He looked up at the sky, which was clear and the light of the sky was very dazzling. Lamont slowly lowered his head, glanced at Moore in the deep pit, and shook his head slightly. At the same time, Li Ming in the center of the insect hole had been completely submerged by the alien insects. The sharp insect mouth and the dagger-like bone spurs on the insect claws stabbed Li Ming frantically. Most of Li Ming's body was wrapped in armor, and only a few limbs were exposed. The exposed limbs were almost vulnerable, and were directly pierced, but the armored parts were safe and sound. The sharp beaks of the insects attacked the armor just like a blade hitting an iron block, making only a clanging sound, and not even leaving the slightest mark on the armor. However, the exposed part of the limbs felt unbearable pain. Li Ming gritted his teeth, and endured the pain, and his clear mind began to think about countermeasures. All possible countermeasures were almost instantly selected in Li Ming's brain. After thinking about all his means, the answer was that there was no countermeasure. Stardust weapons, unique abilities? Li Ming seemed to suddenly think of something. Li Ming did not know much about stardust weapons, but he had seen them. When he fought with Wilma on Mars, the stardust weapon in Wilma's hand could turn into a giant and launch an attack. Li Ming did not understand what it meant at the time. Now thinking about it, it might be the unique ability of the stardust weapon mentioned by Moore. Looking at the weapon in his hand, he did not find any other uses except swinging. As Li Ming pondered, the armor on various parts of his body were making dang collision sounds. These sounds were caused by the attacks of the alien insects, and accompanied by severe pain in certain parts of his limbs. With Li Ming's current cognition, he could use his brain to block the feeling of pain. Although he could not feel the pain, he could still clearly sense the extent of the wound. The blood was flowing, and the wound was still breaking. Go to hell. How could I die here? Li Ming used all his strength to hold Hulan with both hands, and the energy in his body rushed into the long sword frantically. This was a method that Li Ming had never used before, because according to his previous cognition, this was just a sharp sword. As the energy was injected, Hulong suddenly had a slight vibration, which was like an earthquake before a volcanic eruption, as if some suppressed power was about to awaken. This power is. Li Ming showed a surprised expression. Although he injected a lot of energy into Hulong, this energy immediately received a response as soon as it entered Hulong, as if something in the long sword responded. That feeling was like suddenly using a key to open a shining door in the dark night, and the light continued to be released as the door opened. Li Ming only focused on injecting energy into the sword, and the surroundings of his body began to change. The alien insects actually slowly broke away from Li Ming. These alien insects desperately wanted to continue attacking Li Ming, but their bodies could not help but retreat, as if there was some force pulling them, making these alien insects desperately baring their fangs and claws at Li Ming and making buzzing sounds, while being forced to break away from Li Ming. A wide space immediately formed around Li Ming, and all the alien insects retreated far to the side, but as long as the eyes looked around, they would feel like they were in hell. All the places the eyes could see were those buzzing alien insects, with claws and sharp beaks constantly waving at Li Ming, but their bodies could not move forward half a step. Not only that, these alien insects began to flow in the air. Li Ming looked up and found the reason. At the top of the Hulong sword, a vortex with strong gravitational force has formed. The alien insects are pulled by this force. The flowing insect swarm is like a vortex on the water surface, condensing in the air in a spiral shape. As Li Ming continues to inject energy into Hulong, the speed of the vortex rotation is getting faster and faster. The insect swarm is like bricks and tiles, one tightly pressed against another and crowded together. The whole sky is dark, and countless alien insects are rotating in the air in the form of a vortex, as if a certain species group is carrying out some activities. The strange and amazing scene makes Li Ming completely stunned. This is the unique ability of the 5th level Stardust weapon. Li Ming gritted his teeth. There was no alien insect around his body. Whether it was flying or not, the insects had gathered in the sky at this moment, floating, rotating, and condensing towards a certain center point. After a while, a black sphere appeared in the air. The entire black sphere was completely formed by the accumulation of alien insects. At this time, Li Ming also clearly sensed this constantly condensing force. As long as Li Ming increases the energy injection, the gravity will increase. Although the insect swarm has formed a huge sphere, there are still a large number of flying insects flying and circling around the periphery of the sphere, neither being sucked into the sphere nor flying away. Li Ming's energy injection has reached its limit. At this time, the gravity is the maximum limit of Li Ming's ability to exert the ability of Hulong. Most of the alien insects have been condensed, and only a very small number are still flying around. Looking at the giant insect ball in the sky, Li Ming was also a little dazed. What should I do next? He looked at the weapon in his hand again, frowned, and muttered, I still don't understand the ability of this weapon enough, or my civilization level is too low. Unable to figure out the reason, and not knowing what to do next, Li Ming could only continue to use energy to activate Hulong. But Li Ming knew that his energy was limited, and if he continued to consume it like this, he would definitely die here. MD. I can't care about that. Li Ming's eyes narrowed, and he used all the energy in his feet. Suddenly, his hands loosened and stopped injecting energy into the grey waterfall. At the same time, his feet flew out like the tires of a motor. He only felt the meteorites under his feet squeaking, and Li Ming's figure quickly shuttled through the meteorites. The speed of spiritual civilization is extraordinary, almost the fastest among all civilizations. At this time, Li Ming also used it to the limit. Sand and stones flew across the sky, like a rabbit running in the grass. The swarm of insects in the air were no longer bound by gravity. With a buzz, they scattered and flew around like a swarm of bees. At this time, any moving creature in the meteorite area would be regarded as prey and be besieged by the swarm of insects. Li Ming put away the grey waterfall, used all the remaining energy in his body to his legs, and ran wildly. Those 5th level disciples who were heading to the center of the magic cave suddenly stopped at this time and looked up at the sky. The dark swarm of insects was constantly flying. There were also many alien insects following behind Li Ming. He glanced at them from the corner of his eye and saw that there were about a dozen of them. It would be easy to take out Hulong to deal with these alien insects. But as long as he paused, more alien insects would inevitably be attracted. The only way to survive now was to continue to escape. Entering the magic cave may have consumed a lot of time and energy, but when running out, Li Ming could see the willow blade forest in the distance in almost an instant. As long as he entered the willow blade forest, he would basically get rid of these alien insects. According to Li Ming's cognition, the survival of alien insects is very dependent on these falling meteorites. When leaving the meteorite area, the alien insects will become weaker and relatively safer. Although Li Ming's speed was fast, he could not get rid of the alien insects. Only those alien insects without wings gradually disappeared from his sight, but the alien insects in the sky were getting closer and closer to Li Ming. While running wildly, Li Ming did not forget to look back. He was very close to the willow blade forest, only a few kilometers away, but the flying insects were only a few hundred meters away from Li Ming. At this speed, Li Ming would be caught up by these alien insects before he entered the willow blade forest. The wounds on his body were still bleeding, and running so fast accelerated the flow of blood. Excessive blood loss made Li Ming feel a little uncomfortable. With a flip of his right hand, a star bag appeared in his hand. This star bag was given to Li Ming by Clean before Li Ming entered the magic cave. It contained the healing potion of the Light Medicine clan, which could come in handy at this time. Chapter 106, Encounter. A flash of white light appeared in his palm, the star bag disappeared, and 3 green pills appeared in his hand. Without caring too much, he slapped his palm to his mouth, and the 3 pills went down his throat, and were swallowed by Li Ming. The pills entered his stomach, and it was like 3 fireballs constantly releasing warm currents in his body. The wound that was originally bleeding began to slowly recover. Li Ming could clearly sense this recovery. Although he didn't know the true effect of the pills, he could clearly feel the changes in his body. Is this medicine so magical? As the efficacy of the medicine fermented rapidly, Li Ming's perception became clearer and clearer, as if he had taken stimulants. Even when he was running, the wound was bleeding on its own. Although it couldn't recover immediately, the effect of stopping bleeding was still very obvious. The body seemed to be full of strength in an instant, and his consciousness became clearer. Li Ming couldn't help but smile a little, secretly sighing at the magical effect of the medicine, but the smile had not yet fully unfolded, and it immediately solidified. Although he didn't look back, the buzzing sound was already very clear, as if it was right next to his ear. Oh no, they're catching up. Li Ming glanced back carefully, his face turned pale instantly. A dozen flying insects were already above his head, preparing to attack with their sharp beaks. A quick whoosh sounded in his ears, as if someone was stabbing Li Ming's head with a sword. Li Ming paused, stopped where he was, and quickly dodged sideways. Almost at the same time, a flying insect flew directly past Li Ming's ear. If he hadn't dodged in time, this attack would have pierced Li Ming's head. Fortunately, Li Ming had spiritual civilization and could predict attacks. But as soon as he stopped, the dozen flying insects immediately surrounded him, their sharp beaks like flying swords, flying back and forth in the air with the sound of flapping wings. Li Ming tensed his nerves, looked around with his eyes, and his strong consciousness paid attention to every flying insect. Although there were already a dozen flying insects in front of him, there were countless flying insects in the farther meteorite area. Those flying insects seemed to be flying aimlessly, but Li Ming knew that they would all gather around in a short while. The sound of swoosh, swoosh, swoosh kept ringing in his ears. Li Ming had already put his right hand into his pocket. At this moment, he had no choice but to fight. After dodging several attacks, Li Ming had taken out the round stardust. A white light flashed. Just as Li Ming was about to launch the great Aki, a green light suddenly flashed in the sky and a giant bird flew by. The bird was green all over, 7 or 8 meters long, with a wingspan of more than 10 meters. Its sharp claws grabbed it like 2 big hands, and a crunch sound was heard. When the claws were released again, 7 or 8 flying insects had become corpses and fell to the ground. The giant bat then turned around and flew back again. This time, the giant bat did not fly quickly, but stopped in the air. With a few waving of its claws, it swept away the remaining flying insects and killed them all, quickly and cleanly. Li Ming stood there with a look of surprise. His eyes turned, and he suddenly discovered something. Then he clenched his palm and collected the great Aki. At this time, there was no flying insect in the sky, only a giant green bird, and Li Ming's eyes were focused on the back of the bird. An alien was sitting quietly on it, looking at Li Ming with contempt. This person was the chief priest of the beast taming tribe, Norma. After flapping its wings twice, the giant bat slowly landed on the ground, and a tall figure stood in front of Li Ming. Norma slowly stood up from the bird's back, glanced at Li Ming, and said in a low voice, "Who are you? Why are you on our fellow star?" Li Ming was stunned for a moment, thinking quickly in his mind. Li Ming naturally didn't know Norma in front of him, but the powerful aura of the other party's 7th level civilization had already been revealed. This high level existence was not like a flying insect, and Li Ming could be killed almost by raising his hand. "Huh. Don't say it, foreigner, then I will kill you on the spot." Norma showed displeasure, raised his right hand, and prepared to use some means. Li Ming was shocked and said quickly, "I'm a subordinate of the High Priest Lamont of the Death Medicine clan. I'm here to participate in the Demon Cave operation arranged by Mentor Clean." Norma's expression changed when he heard this, and he showed some interest. After looking at Li Ming again, he said, "Participating in the Demon Cave operation?" Norma narrowed his eyes slightly, and suddenly became furious, and shouted, "Liar. As the High Priest of the Tamer clan, I have seen all the people who participated in the Demon Cave operation. How come I haven't seen you?" Li Ming did not dare to hesitate, bowed his head slightly, and replied respectfully, I was arranged by Clean to come in last night. Maybe it's because of this." Li Ming thought quickly and replied carefully, for fear of angering the other party. "Oh." Norma's mouth corners slightly raised, revealing a look of thinking about something else, as if he remembered something. Last night, could he be the bait arranged by Lamont? Norma said to herself, staring at Li Ming with her eyes. Her eyes suddenly widened a little, and asked with interest, "Since you are also a participant in the Demon Cave operation, what is the situation in the Demon Cave now? Have you got the worm flower fruit?" This question made Li Ming think deeply. Li Ming did get the worm flower fruit, and 2 of them, but Li Ming joined the Death Medicine clan, and the man in front of him was the High Priest of the Beast Tamer clan, so Li Ming needed to be extremely cautious. The Zerg in the Demon Cave has fully awakened, and the situation is very dangerous, but the disciple still got the worm flower fruit by chance. "What? You got the worm flower fruit?" Norma said in surprise, and his body couldn't help but move, and he even couldn't believe it. But after realizing her own gaffe, Norma immediately regained her composure, smiled lightly, and said, "Since you have met me, those flying insects cannot threaten you for the time being, and as the High Priest, I'm here to meet you, the returning disciples of the Demon Cave. Come on, come to my Skylark, and I will take you back." Li Ming hesitated for a moment, and looked at the other party cautiously. Norma waved her hand slightly, and said in a soft voice, "Since you have joined the Death Medicine clan, in other words, you are also a member of our Fuller Star Florence people, and you have also taken the insect flower fruit, and you will get a lot of benefits after you go back." Li Ming did not dare to refuse, so he could only bow his head and replied, "Disciple will follow the arrangements of the High Priest." Norma nodded with satisfaction. Li Ming then boarded the Skylark. The bird's back was spacious and soft, and it was extremely comfortable to sit on it. The key point was that this bird was a rare 5th level strength. According to Li Ming's knowledge, even a 7th level civilization would not have a 5th level strength beast. This surprised Li Ming. Sitting on this bird, Li Ming's mood was still a little complicated. Although he got rid of the siege of flying insects, and was relatively safe, he was still a little scared when facing a 7th level civilization. Maybe the slightest wrong move would bring about a fatal disaster. The 4 major races of the Florentines have always been fighting openly and secretly. Li Ming participated in the Demon Cave operation as a member of the Death Medicine clan. Norma of the Beast Tamer clan has learned that he has the insect flower fruit. What will happen next is still unknown. Now he can only take one step at a time. Chapter 107. Wisdom is not the pinnacle of evolution. Above the giant tree, a bird flapped its wings and flew over. This bird was green, and it was a skylark. The 7 or 8 meter long bird was as small as a mosquito in front of the giant tree, and many aliens on the tree trunk were looking over here. A pair of steel-like claws slowly fell on the tree trunk, and Norma and Li Ming jumped off the bird's back. As soon as they landed, Norma waved his right arm backwards, shook off his cloak, and the skylark turned into a green light and drilled into the cloak. The giant skylark disappeared out of thin air, and a green bird-shaped pattern appeared inside Norma's cloak, as if the skylark had turned into a pattern and pasted it inside the cloak. Li Ming took a sneak peek and found that there were many other wild beast patterns inside Norma's open cloak, each of which was lifelike, as if it was real. "High Priest, you are back." A 6th level mentor seemed to have been waiting here for a long time and suddenly stepped forward and said after seeing Norma. Norma nodded slightly, looked at the other person, and said, "What's the matter, Fitch?" The 6th level instructor named Fitch was about to report something, and his eyes could not help but glance at Li Ming beside him, as if there was something that was inconvenient to tell outsiders. Norma also saw the other party's intention, smiled lightly, and said, "It doesn't matter, just tell me if you have anything to say." Fitch heard this, and then he was relieved, and bowed his head again, saying, "It's like this, we have already dealt with the matter of the Fixie people. Several other high priests have sent a notice, asking you to go to the central tree fort immediately, to discuss the matter of the Fixie people." Norma nodded slightly, showing a thoughtful look, and after looking at Li Ming beside him, he turned his eyes back to Fitch and said, "I know, you go and tell them that I will be there soon. I have something else to deal with alone right now, so you go first." Yes." Fitch hesitated for a while and still replied like this, but when Fitch raised his head, he looked at Li Ming with a strange look. After all, the matter of dealing with the Fixie people was extremely important and was a priority, but Norma put it aside for the time being. It was obvious that it had something to do with Li Ming, a foreigner. Fitch, who was only a 6th level civilization, naturally did not dare to ask more questions. Norma then walked straight to somewhere, and Li Ming behind him just followed closely. Passing through a certain portal, they came to a closed room. The whole room was filled with many facilities. It was Norma's private space. Li Ming just glanced at it and stood still. Norma came to a table in the room, sat down slowly, smiled at Li Ming, and said, "What's your name?" As Norma spoke, he casually picked up a star book from the table, staring at the star book in his hand, looking absent-minded, as if he didn't take Li Ming too seriously. Li Ming quickly bowed his head and replied respectfully, "My name is Li Ming." With respectful behavior and humble tone, a high-ranking 7th order civilization would naturally not take a 5th order civilization seriously. Li Ming was very clear about this, and naturally had to be as cautious as possible in front of the other party. "Yeah." Norma nodded slightly, glanced at Li Ming, and continued to look at the star book in her hand, but said, "How did you come to Alpha Star, and how did you join the Death Medicine clan?" Li Ming hesitated slightly, and an idea flashed in his mind, and he replied, "Disciple had been living in Cruz Bay before, and later I accidentally met High Priest Lamont. Because Disciple had rescued a little girl named Xenia before, High Priest Lamont wanted to bring Xenia back here. Because Disciple saved Xenia's life, and has always taken good care of her, Xenia may have some gratitude to Disciple, and is unwilling to be separated from Disciple. So High Priest Lamont brought Disciple back to Fuller Star, and later let Disciple join the Death Medicine clan of Fuller Star. That's what happened." Li Ming spoke cautiously, not daring to conceal anything, because Li Ming knew very well that lying in front of a high-level civilization was very dangerous. Even if the other party was not a spiritual civilization, it might be seen through. This is like a child lying to an adult on Earth. If you are not careful, you will be seen through. Norma seemed to be interested. Her eyes suddenly turned, and she stared at Li Ming closely. She put the star book in her hand back on the table. "So, you are very familiar with Xenia, and Xenia is also very dependent on you?" Norma asked with interest. Li Ming did not answer immediately, but hesitated for a while before saying, "There is some familiarity, but not dependence, because since arriving at Fuller Star, Xenia has found a Fixie person named Sol, who seems to be one of her relatives, so the Disciple has been alienated." "Oh." Norma nodded slowly, her eyes slightly moving, as if thinking about something. After a moment, Norma suddenly stood up, looked at Li Ming with his eyes, smiled slightly, and said, "You stay here for the time being. I have other things to deal with now. When I see Lamont, I will tell him about your situation, and then you can return to the Death Medicine clan." Disciple obeys. Li Ming bowed his head and replied. Norma nodded in satisfaction, and then left through a portal. As soon as Norma's figure disappeared, Li Ming breathed a sigh of relief. The oppression in front of a 7th level civilization was also relieved a lot. Li Ming had no idea what would happen next. Although Norma did not mention the matter of the worm flower fruit just now, Li Ming knew that, since he had said that the worm flower fruit was on him, he would definitely hand it over. Fortunately, Li Ming had 2 worm flower fruits on him. One of this kind of thing was enough for Li Ming to use, and it would be fine to hand over the extra ones. Li Ming gradually relaxed and began to look at the room. There were star racks, lockers, chairs, and even various meteorites and illustrations, all kinds of facilities. These basic supplies seemed to be of no great use, but they were indispensable for an alien with the position of high priest. The high priest and the great mentor were the right-hand men of the patriarch, and they needed to review and deal with daily matters. It was normal to have more facilities in the room. As a low-level creature on Earth, Li Ming rarely saw the daily life of a high-level civilization, so he was extremely curious. His eyes seemed to be looking at some scenery, looking east and west, like a naughty child, but Li Ming's figure stayed in place without moving. His eyes suddenly stopped after seeing the table, and his eyes narrowed slightly. The star book on the table caught Li Ming's attention. Li Ming did not approach immediately, but used his consciousness to sense around. Li Ming must make sure that there is no surveillance equipment here. His eyes and consciousness quickly covered the entire room. This small room was carefully sensed by Li Ming. After confirming that there was no abnormality, Li Ming slowly took a step, followed by 2 steps. 3 steps, and did not stop until he reached the table. He did not touch the table or anything with his hands, but leaned down, bent over, and stared at the star book with his eyes. Under his gaze, the content inside was being absorbed by Li Ming bit by bit. This star book belongs to the middle level star book, and the content inside is exactly the method of taming beasts of the beast taming tribe. This level of star book cannot be learned by ordinary 5th level civilizations at all, because the level of civilization limits cognition and learning methods. But Li Ming is different. He has spiritual civilization, top level star records, and the 6 domain maxing eyes. Even if he cannot learn all the contents, he can record them first. Li Ming is not in a hurry to learn and practice this star record immediately. He will store it in his brain bit by bit first, and then study it slowly when he has spare time in the future. There is a reason why humans are low-level creatures, that is, the human brain cannot be fully developed. Ordinary humans only use 3% of their brains, and even energetic scientists only use 5%. Li Ming understood this after he advanced. Now the use of Li Ming's brain is also constantly developing and increasing with the advancement. This is why Li Ming can have multiple civilizations at the same time, and it is also the inherent talent of humans. In addition, the end point of biological evolution is not necessarily wisdom. Survival of the fittest is the survival of the fittest. No matter what kind of civilization, or what kind of life, adapting to the environment of the mother star, and having the means to survive is the top. On the previous Earth, dinosaurs dominated for 160 million years. Although they did not evolve wisdom, their powerful bodies were their means of ruling and survival. If an asteroid had not hit the Earth, there would probably be no human beings today. Humans are extremely weak. It is no exaggeration to say that human bodies can hardly fight against any animals in nature. So humans have evolved intelligence, but this is not for ruling the Earth, but just for survival. With the improvement of civilization level, cognition is constantly increasing. The Zerg that dominates a planet does not have much wisdom, but once they invade other planets, they can still threaten the living environment of intelligent life with their strong adaptability and reproductive survival ability. Strength is closely related to wisdom, but wisdom is not everything. Ability is the key. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and the contents of the star book were also taken into his mind bit by bit. From a distance, it seemed as if Li Ming was just bending over to look at something strange. Chapter 108, Distribution of Insects, Flowers and Fruits. At this moment, in the central tree fort of the Florentine military tree, 4 high priests were sitting opposite each other, discussing something with each other. Lamont sat in the chief position, his eyes turned, and after looking at the other three, he finally stopped at Norma, showing an unhappy expression. Odin said directly, "Norma? What do you mean? You let the three of us wait for you here for a long time. You are really arrogant." Norma looked calm, and not only did not get angry, but smiled slightly and said, "Didn't I say it? I came back a little late from the wild forest, so I was delayed." Odin still looked unyielding and said, "Norma, if you want to find another excuse, it may be reasonable. As a beast tamer, it is easy for you to capture a few wild beasts. How can you be slower than the three of us? I think you are just showing off. You don't take us seriously," Odin said viciously, and while speaking, he also looked at Lamont. Norma still didn't care, and didn't get angry. She just said, "You can say whatever you want. Let's start discussing the Phasey people first. You, High Priest Lamont, look at him, he actually," Odin said angrily, but Lamont waved his hand, looked at Norma slightly, and smiled. "Let's not worry about this for now, let's talk about the Phasey people. After all, in addition to the Phasey people, we still have to discuss the matter of the Zumi Gate. After all, this time the matter of the Zumi Gate was specially handed over to us by our four patriarchs after discussion." Odin smiled lightly after hearing this, and replied, "I also heard about this from our patriarch. Since Lamont has spoken, let's talk about the Phasey people first." Lamont nodded slightly, and continued, "There are a total of 15 Phasey people hiding at the edge of the magic cave in the savage forest. These Phasey people hid there during the Star Raid incident. If the magic cave had not been opened this time, we would not have discovered it. The highest of these people is only level 5, and the lowest is only level 2. They are basically worthless, so I want to take them into the Death Medicine clan area of Shianshu College. What do you think?" Lamont rolled his eyes and said slowly, "If it were normal, the other three would definitely not agree. The Phasey people have the ability to synthesize and refine pills, but not every Phasey person has this ability. If you want to obtain these abilities, it is naturally very important to control some Phasey people." Lamont opened his mouth and wanted to take everyone in. Naturally, the three people were a little dissatisfied in their hearts. Odin hesitated for a while, and finally remained silent. Berg of the Light Medicine clan also hesitated for a while and said, "High Priest Lamont, this is a bit inappropriate. After the last star raiding incident, those remnants were taken into custody by your Death Medicine clan. This time, we should share it equally among the four families." Although Berg was also taboo about the quota of the Falling Rice Gate, he was still unwilling to compromise and give in easily on the matter of the Phasey people. Norma, who was standing by, heard this and then said, "I think what High Priest Berg said is very true. When we entered the Demon Cave to capture the Phasey people, it was a joint action of our four major clans. The captured people should have been divided equally. Moreover, I heard from the instructors below that there are 3 low-level alchemists among the 15 people." The two said this, which made Lamont's face a little unhappy. The only remaining Odin remained silent, but just glanced at Lamont. "Then according to your opinion, how should these 15 people be handled and distributed?" Lamont's unhappy expression immediately recovered, and he smiled slightly. But this smile made people look very uncomfortable, as if it was a bit threatening. Obviously, if they asked for the Phasey people, they might lose the quota for the Falling Rice Gate. Berg looked thoughtful and hesitant, but Norma said directly, "We must allocate one of the 3 pharmacists to the Beast Tamer clan. It doesn't matter how the others are allocated." Lamont heard this, and still smiled without saying anything. At the same time, his eyes looked at Berg again. Norma asked for a key person right away, which surprised Berg. After some hesitation, he said, "We, the Light Medicine clan, also need a pharmacist." Lamont nodded slightly, and finally looked at Odin. Odin glanced at the other 2 people, suddenly snorted, and said, "It's useless for those remnants to come. I will listen to your arrangements, High Priest Lamont." "Well, okay," Lamont said loudly, with a half smile on his face, and said, "Okay, that's it. Norma chooses one person, Berg chooses one person, and the rest are all left to our Death Medicine clan." Although Lamont showed a smile on his face, his dissatisfaction was completely expressed in his tone. After saying this, Lamont took a deep breath and said again, Since the affairs of the Fenizi people have been properly distributed, shouldn't we talk about the gate of falling rice? Odin smiled faintly after hearing this, and looked at Norma and Berg coldly, and said, yes, it's time to talk about the gate of falling rice. The quota for the gate of falling rice. Wait. Lamont was interrupted by Norma as soon as he opened his mouth. This made Lamont's originally unhappy expression suddenly more angry. He glared at Norma with his eyes wide open and said, Norma? Do you have anything else to say? Norma smiled and said, there are not only Fenizi people in this magic cave, but also insect flowers and fruits. Doesn't this matter need to be discussed? Insect flowers and fruits? Lamont said these 3 words one by one, and showed a strange look at the same time. Not only Lamont, but Odin and Berg also looked at Norma with strange eyes. Lamont looked at Odin beside him and whispered, Odin, have you received the returning disciples? Odin shook his head quickly, and looked at Berg. Berg said nothing, just shook his head slightly. Norma noticed all these small actions at this time, and said with a smile, the reason why I came back a little late is that I met a disciple from the Dead Medicine clan, and this person has already got the worm flower fruit. Dead Medicine clan? Lamont's eyes widened a little, his thoughts turned quickly, and he thought to himself, Hamilton and Hochir are dead, how come there are still disciples from the Dead Medicine clan? And they got the worm flower fruit? Could it be? Lamont suddenly remembered something and blurted out. Hearing this, Norma said quickly, yes, it's him, the person that High Priest Lamont just thought of. Although Lamont didn't say it, Norma had guessed his thoughts, but Lamont still shook his head slightly and said, impossible, Norma, don't talk nonsense, this matter is of great importance, you have to be careful when you speak. Norma smiled and said, then I will remind High Priest Lamont that this person is called Li Ming. As soon as the name Li Ming came out, Lamont's puzzled expression disappeared completely. The matter about Li Ming was Lamont's secret. Except for Lamont and Clean, few people in the tribe knew about it, not to mention the other 3 tribes. At this time, Norma could say this name, obviously not a fabrication, and Berg and Odin on the side were confused. After Norma glanced at Berg and Odin, he said again, this person is now with me, and he still has insects, flowers and fruits on him. Let's discuss how to distribute it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109, Fighting for a Quota. Lamont snorted lightly, revealing a stern look, and said, Li Ming is a member of our Dead Medicine clan. He got the worm flower fruit. It cannot be said that it should belong to our Dead Medicine clan, but at least it is the credit of our people. I'm very grateful that you, High Priest Norma, took Li Ming back. As for how to distribute the worm flower fruit, you should return Li Ming to our Dead Medicine clan first, and then talk about it. Lamont continued to speak, staring at Norma. Norma smiled slightly and said, High Priest Lamont is right. There is only one worm flower fruit, and it was taken by a disciple of the Dead Medicine clan. I have no objection to giving this fruit to the Dead Medicine clan, but it's just that I'm more concerned about the allocation of quotas for the Falling Rice Gate. Norma said very frankly, and his intention was also very obvious, that is, to exchange the worm flower fruit for quotas. This surprised Odin and Berg. Odin was relatively calm, but Berg looked at Norma with a strange look. Berg asked Lamont for the Fixie people because he was completely unwilling to hand over all the Fixie people to Lamont, but he didn't know that Norma had a certain trump card when asking Lamont for the Fixie people. When mentioning the quota of the Zumi Gate, Lamont smiled softly and said, the Zumi Gate is the star secret realm of the Fixie people. It not only contains various alchemy star records and synthetic star records, but also various alchemy instruments. It can be said that this secret realm supports the entire Fixie tribe. Back then, the advanced civilization visited Alpha Star. For the sake of being a biological civilization, they left a secret treasure, the Liuanding. The whereabouts of this item has been unknown since the star raiding incident. It can be said that this is a big loss for Alpha Star. Although the Liuanding is gone, there is still an important star record. Lamont suddenly stood up when he said this, with a look of longing, looking at the roof with his eyes. After hesitating for a while, he turned his eyes back and looked at the other 3 people again and said, "This star book is the secret book of alchemy. It is still unknown whether it will be in the Gate of Falling Rice. However, after the Gate of Falling Rice is opened this time, the things inside are of great significance to us Florentians. It can be said that, as long as we have these star books, our fuller star's status in the outer system will be greatly improved. However, this Gate of Falling Rice can only send 9 people in at a time, and the number of places is really limited." At this point, Lamont looked at the 3 people in front of the table again, and snorted and said, "Compared with the things in the Gate of Falling Rice, the insect flower fruit is still far behind." After saying this, the others just looked at each other and didn't say much. Obviously, every word Lamont said was true and real. After all, as far as biological civilization is concerned, if you don't know how to make alchemy and synthesize 2 abilities, it is almost worthless. With the abilities of the 4 major races of Florentines alone, they don't even have much say in the outer system. The biological civilization has weak combat power, and the strongest combat power is the 4 major racial abilities of the Florentines, but these 4 abilities are almost insignificant compared to the power civilization and the wisdom civilization. Therefore, alchemy and synthesis are the pillars of the existence of this civilization, and are the top priority. This is very clear to any biological civilization life. Of course, for a single race, this is also a symbol of the status between races. Weighing the pros and cons, it is extremely important to strive for more places in the Falling Rice Gate. Auden first glanced at Norma and Berg, then looked at Lamont with a smile, and then said, "According to the Patriarch, Xenia is in the hands of the Death Medicine clan, which means that the Death Medicine clan holds the key to the Gate of Falling Rice. If the quotas are distributed, the 4 major clans must have a share. As for the number of quotas, it depends on the opinion of High Priest Lamont. Of course, I also recommend this insect flower fruit to the Death Medicine clan." Auden said this after some thought. This statement was also within Lamont's expectations. After looking at Auden, he nodded slightly and said nothing. At this time, Berg sighed deeply, showing an indifferent expression, and said coldly, "Since the 3 of you have agreed on the distribution of the insect flower fruit, I can't say anything more. Just give it to the Death Medicine clan." Hehe. Lamont chuckled a few times, nodded slowly, and said, "Since the matter of the insect flower fruit has been settled, then I will allocate the quota for the Falling Rice Gate. Death Medicine clan, 4 people, 2 beast tamers, 2 alien species, light medicine, 1. Lamont said slowly with a smug look on his face. Hearing this result, Berg's face suddenly became ugly, snorted, and stood up. "Since the distribution is completed, I will go back to prepare." As soon as the voice fell, Berg turned and left. His behavior and words were full of anger. Seeing this, Auden smiled, glanced at Lamont, and said, "Then I will go back to prepare." Lamont looked at Berg's disappearing back with a solemn look, glanced at Auden, and didn't say much. Seeing this, Auden also stood up and left the room quickly. In the spacious room, besides the table, there were only Norma and Lamont. Norma was satisfied with the allocation of Lamont's quota, but he had his own plans in mind. He turned his eyes and looked at Lamont and said, "Lamont, the insect flower fruit can be given to you, but Li Ming, I want to accept him as a disciple and let him join our beast taming tribe." "Oh." Lamont narrowed his eyes slightly, slowly sat back at the table, and looked at Norma quietly with his eyes, thinking about something in his mind. I'm afraid it won't work. Li Ming is already a member of our Death Medicine clan, and I brought him back to Fuller Star myself. How can he join your beast taming tribe?" Lamont didn't know Norma's intention, but he was the first to reject the other party's request. Norma looked puzzled and worried after hearing this. After all, there was a purpose for taking Li Ming into the beast taming tribe. She was worried that this plan would be seen through by the other party. After taking a long breath, she said again, "Lamont, although others don't know about Li Ming, I, Norma, know it very well. You sent him to the magic cave as bait. If Li Ming knew this, would he still stay in your Dead Medicine tribe? Now, by chance, Li Ming got the insect flower fruit and was besieged by the insects in the magic cave. I rescued him. I didn't take the insect flower fruit for myself. I gave it to your dead medicine tribe. It's not too much for me to keep this person. Norma continued, as if he needed Li Ming very much. Lamont suddenly paused and fell into deep thought. The ownership of the insect flower fruit was a foregone conclusion, and Li Ming was almost useless. According to common sense, it didn't seem to be a big deal to hand Li Ming over to Norma. After Lamont pondered for a while, his body was stunned for a moment, and his eyes widened a little, as if he suddenly thought of something. He looked at the other party sternly and said, "Norma, you." Lamont nodded slowly, as if he had suddenly realized something. After chuckling twice, he said, "Norma, it was Clean's personal idea to arrange Li Ming as bait, not mine. When Li Ming comes back, I will definitely hold Clean accountable and reward Li Ming. This is also an internal matter of our death medicine, so you don't have to worry about it." Norma frowned when she heard this and didn't know what to say. Lamont smiled strangely and said, "To be honest, I plan to let Li Ming participate in this fallen rice gate and give him an important position, so I will never hand him over to you." Norma said nothing, but gritted her teeth and said in her heart, "Lamont still sees through my thoughts." Although Norma was a little unwilling, she couldn't confront him head on at this time. She stared at him closely, hesitated for a while, snorted, and said, "Well, in that case, I'll have someone send Li Ming back to you in a while." "No." Lamont waved his hand, his face gloomy, and said, "There's no need to send someone to send him over. I'll let Clean go back with you, and then Clean will bring Li Ming back personally." Norma narrowed her eyes slightly. A weird smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, and then she got up and left. Norma knew that there were many conflicts between her and Lamont. If she hadn't met Li Ming this time, she would probably have only one quota for the Gate of Falling Rice, just like Berg. Now that she has obtained a pharmacist from Phasian to quotas for the Gate of Falling Rice, it can be said that it is very worthwhile. Lamont watched Norma leave with a cold snort and whispered to himself, "It's a good idea to use the relationship between Li Ming and Xenia to gain the advantage of the Gate of Falling Rice." Chapter 110 Reward. In a room, Li Ming stood quietly, his eyes closed, motionless, as if thinking about something. At this time, Li Ming's brain had added some content, which was about a star book of the Beast Tamer tribe. Just as Li Ming was thinking about the content of the star book, the portal behind him suddenly flashed green light, and two figures walked out from it. His eyes suddenly opened, and he turned his head slightly. The people who came in were Norma and Clean. Li Ming bowed his head and saluted without saying a word. Norma came to Li Ming's side, smiled slightly, and said, "I have told the High Priest Lamont about you. Mentor Clean is here to take you back. You can go with him." Li Ming bowed his head again, still without speaking, but turned his eyes to Clean. At this time, Clean also showed a bit of humility and said, "Let's go, Li Ming. The High Priest specially asked me to take you back." Clean said this and saluted Norma with a smile, then turned and left. Li Ming followed closely and disappeared in the portal with Clean. Looking at the two people leaving, Norma suddenly showed a strange expression and snorted coldly. Under Clean's leadership, Li Ming came to another part of the military tree, which was the area of the Death Medicine clan. The two walked slowly in the corridor of the branches until they stopped in front of a certain portal. Clean stopped first, hesitated for a while, and suddenly looked back at Li Ming and said, "Wait here, I will inform the High Priest." Clean said and went directly into the portal. A green light flashed, and Clean came to a room. At this time, Lamont was sitting at a table, holding an item in his hand, and looking at it carefully. "High Priest, Li Ming has brought it back and is outside." Clean bowed his head and said respectfully. Upon hearing this, Lamont quickly put down the things in his hand, looked at Clean intently, smiled slightly, and said, "Outside? Why not let him in?" Clean hesitated, thought for a while, and said, "High Priest, there is something I don't quite understand, so I want to report to you alone first, then." "Oh." Lamont showed an interested expression and said, "What is it?" Clean hesitated for a moment, as if he was taboo about something. After a little hesitation, he mustered up the courage to ask, "It's about the Gate of Falling Rice. This is originally an internal matter of our Fuller Star's biological civilization. I know the High Priest wants this person to participate, but I don't think this is appropriate." After all, those star names are different from insects, flowers and fruits. They are extremely important to our fellow star. I'm afraid the patriarch will not agree. Lamont smiled lightly and immediately understood Clean's intention. Then he stood up and said, "You are a little too worried about this. The patriarch has ordered that this matter be handed over to me for full responsibility. I have my own sense of propriety. You don't have to worry at all." Lamont was a little displeased and said so, but after seeing Clean's puzzled and worried expression, he immediately smiled lightly and continued, "I know what you are worried about, so I might as well tell you, so that you won't be at a loss when the patriarch asks you. Li Ming and Xenia have a good relationship. If not, we would not bring him back to Fuller Star. This kind of relationship cannot be replaced by Thor. In case Xenia knows the secret of the Fallen Rice Gate, we can also know it through Li Ming. As far as the entire Fallen Rice Gate operation is concerned, this is very beneficial to us. Besides, even if this kid gets the star status by chance, how can he, an outsider, learn the profound content in it? What's more, his every move is under my control. Am I afraid that he will escape in front of me?" Lamont said confidently, as if he didn't take Li Ming seriously at all. Upon hearing this, Clean nodded repeatedly and smiled slightly, saying, "The high priest is right. It's not that I'm suspicious, but I'm just afraid that the clan leader will ask about this. Well, I know your difficulties. If the clan leader asks, just answer like this. Yes." Clean breathed a long sigh of relief. All the doubts in his heart were resolved, and all the unnecessary worries disappeared. After bowing his head again, he said, "Then I'll let him in right away." Clean bowed and exited the house, and came to the corridor outside through the portal. At this time, Li Ming was still standing there motionless. Clean glanced at Li Ming and said coldly, "Go in." Li Ming bowed his head and saluted, then entered the portal. Watching Li Ming enter, Clean showed a complicated expression, but did not do anything else. Arriving in the house, Li Ming immediately noticed Lamont standing in front of the table. He bowed his head, performed a salute, and said, "Disciple Li Ming, nice to meet the high priest." Lamont nodded with satisfaction, and said with a smile, "No need to be polite. You have made a huge contribution in the Demon Cave operation this time. I must reward you well." Li Ming didn't dare to take credit for it, and replied without raising his head, "This time, the disciple was lucky enough to get the insect flower fruit. It was all arranged by the high priest. There is no credit at all." Having said this, Li Ming immediately remembered something. He reached into his pocket, took out a white fruit, and presented it with both hands, respectfully saying, "This is the insect flower fruit that the disciple took. Now I hand it over to the high priest." Lamont chuckled and raised his hand to take the white fruit in his hand, looking at it carefully. After confirming that it was correct, Lamont could not help but nod his head repeatedly, saying, "Okay, it is indeed a worm flower fruit." He turned his eyes and looked at Li Ming again and said solemnly, "Tell me, what reward do you want? As long as I can give it to you, I will definitely give it to you." Li Ming was excited when he heard this, but when he sensed the breath of the other party's 7th level civilization, he immediately became cautious. His smile faded, and he looked embarrassed, as if he wanted to say something but stopped. Seeing this, Lamont smiled lightly and said, "Li Ming, although you are not from our Fuller Star race, you have joined our Fuller Star after all, and you are a member of our Fuller Star. You are naturally treated equally with other Fuller Star people, so you don't have to have any taboos. If you have any needs, just say it directly." Although Lamont had said so, Li Ming was still full of worries. Li Ming had experienced this kind of situation of asking for things from high-level civilizations. At the beginning, he was humiliated by Elias. With that experience, Li Ming naturally had to be more careful. Disciple does need an item, but I just don't dare to ask. Li Ming said this cautiously, more like giving himself a shot of prevention in advance. "Oh." Lamont paused, thought for a while and smiled slightly. In Lamont's view, what Li Ming wanted was naturally not very important, so he didn't care too much. "Didn't I just say that you can be frank? As long as I have it, I will definitely give it to you." Lamont looked confident, as if he also wanted to give Li Ming something to appease Li Ming. After all, Li Ming still needed to enter the Falling Rice Gate next. Li Ming's eyes turned slightly when he heard this, and his concerns were also eliminated. He slowly raised his head and looked at Lamont. After hesitating for a while, he said, "Disciple, I want a piece of star flame." As soon as the word star flame came out, Lamont was stunned for a moment, showing a stern expression. Seeing this expression, Li Ming hurriedly bowed his head, fearing that he would scare and anger the other party. The importance of star flame is self-evident. The most important thing is that Lamont really has a piece of star flame on him. Star flame is one of the important items for synthesizing star glory. Li Ming already has 2 star feathers, a star GUI, and a star altar. As long as he has star flame, Li Ming can think of ways to synthesize star glory and advance. Li Ming was able to come to Fuller Star just for this star flame, and now is the best opportunity, but it is unknown whether the High Priest of the 7th level civilization will give it to Li Ming. Chapter 111 Ulterior Motives. Lamont slowly took 2 steps forward in front of the table. His stern expression suddenly relaxed. He revealed a slight smile, nodded, and said, "Okay, that's naturally no problem. We originally had such a rule on our Fuller Star. Any disciple who can successfully obtain the insect flower fruit will be heavily rewarded after returning, including helping the disciple advance to civilization. It's just, now the materials for advancement are still in short supply. I'm afraid it will take a while to gather all the materials you need to help you advance. But if you only want 1 piece of star flame, there will be no problem. It's just that this way, I'm treating you a little unfairly." Lamont sighed slightly when he said this, and his sincere expression seemed to really feel sorry for Li Ming. He raised his eyes and said, "But, if you have any other needs, I will do my best to meet them." Lamont said with a smile, as if he really regarded Li Ming as a Florentine. Li Ming was very happy to hear this. He bowed his head and said, "I'm very satisfied to get a piece of star flame. How can I dare to ask for anything else?" Lamont chuckled, and suddenly a golden stone appeared in his hand. Lamont looked at the object in his palm with his eyes. After hesitating for a second or two, he suddenly threw it and said, "This is the star flame. You can take it." Li Ming raised his right hand and took the object in his hand. This object was only the size of a jujube, and its appearance was golden, like a piece of gold. The energy inside scattered, and at the same time, a memory immediately emerged in Li Ming's brain. "It really is star flame." Li Ming was surprised and excited and muttered to himself. He couldn't help but smile. The thing he had been looking for was finally in his hands. The sudden arrival of the star flame made Li Ming smile. After all, with this object, Li Ming's entry into the 6th level civilization was just around the corner. Just when Li Ming was extremely happy, Lamont suddenly coughed twice and said, "The matter of the demon cave is over. There is another thing I have to give you." Hearing this, Li Ming quickly put away the star flame. His smile disappeared, and he showed a serious look. After bowing his head, he said, "The High Priest can give you instructions, and I will do it." Although he said this, Li Ming's heart was clicked, as if he suddenly understood something. The rarity of the star flame is self-evident. Even if Li Ming got the worm flower fruit, as an outsider, he would definitely not be trusted by the Florentines. Although Li Ming asked for the star flame, he did not hold much hope. Lamont agreed after some hesitation, which really surprised Li Ming, but the thing he immediately gave Li Ming made Li Ming feel a little cold in his heart. Sure enough, this star flame is not given for nothing, Li Ming said to himself, and at the same time he also had a few ominous premonitions. Lamont naturally couldn't see what Li Ming was thinking. He smiled and said, "It's a long story, but other than you, no other disciple can do it." Li Ming bowed his head and said nothing, with his ears erect, waiting for Lamont to speak. Lamont turned and walked out of the table, and took a few steps towards Li Ming, saying, "To the east of our Fuller Star is the former residential area of the Fixie tribe. Although there are only a few Fixie people left now, there are still some important things where they lived before, so I want to send someone to get those things back." Li Ming frowned and showed a puzzled expression. Li Ming, a foreigner, was extremely unfamiliar with Fuller Star, and was unfamiliar with any place. Why would he let himself go? Just when Li Ming was puzzled, Lamont continued, "This place is called the Falling Rice Gate. You need a key to enter it. Now we have the key, so entering and exiting is no longer a problem. But after entering, I'm afraid we will face some problems. Li Ming continued to remain silent, waiting for the other party to continue. The key to the falling rice gate is Xenia, so you should know the reason why I asked you to go this time. Lamont half closed his eyes and paused while speaking, as if hinting at something. Li Ming's eyes were blank. He didn't understand Lamont's intention for a moment. After shaking his head slightly, he bowed his head and said, "My disciple is ignorant and failed to understand the high priest's meaning." Lamont chuckled, patted Li Ming's arm gently, and said, "The gate of falling rice is full of dangers. If someone who is not familiar with the environment enters, most of them will never return. But if you can get Xenia's help, you can avoid a lot of dangers. With the relationship between you and her." Before Lamont finished speaking, Li Ming's eyes suddenly widened a few points, with a look of sudden enlightenment, and looked at Lamont, muttering, "So if I go, Xenia will." Lamont suddenly waved his hand, and said with a smile, "It's okay as long as you understand the meaning." Li Ming nodded slowly, frowned slightly, and said again, "But, isn't the mentor named Thor closer to Xenia? And Xenia seems to trust him more." "Hey, you can't say that. There are some things you don't understand. This Sol is indeed closer to Xenia, but after all, Sol is from Fixie, and you, Li Ming, are now from our Florence. This is different." Lamont patted Li Ming's arm again and said meaningfully. Li Ming's eye bags tightened, and the muscles on his face trembled slightly. He already understood what Lamont meant. Obviously, this Sol, a Fixie person who defected to Florence, did not have Florence's trust. He seemed to be just a puppet. In comparison, Lamont seemed to trust himself more. "Disciple. I understand," Li Ming said slowly. "Yeah." Lamont nodded with satisfaction, then raised his right arm and flicked his sleeves. 4 green lights flickered out from his sleeves and fell to the ground. The green light was dazzling at first, but soon faded. When the green light faded, 4 more bamboo cages appeared on the ground in the house. The bamboo cage was square, made of green bamboos. Each bamboo was wrapped with black vines, which was very strange. Moreover, the bamboo cage released strange energy. Li Ming glanced at it and showed a puzzled look on his face, but he found the abnormality in the bamboo cage after sensing it with his consciousness. There were actually wild beasts in this bamboo cage. The ranks of the 4 wild beasts were relatively low. 1 was level 3, 2 were level 2, and there was one that Li Ming could not even sense the level of. "Wild beast? What do you mean?" Li Ming said to himself in his heart, with a puzzled expression and no idea of the intention. Lamont saw what Li Ming was thinking, and after a slight smile, he was about to say something, but before Lamont could open his mouth, the wild beast whose level could not be sensed suddenly made a strange sound of puffing. This wild beast whose level Li Ming could not sense immediately attracted Li Ming's attention. He narrowed his eyes and looked at it seriously. After a careful look, Li Ming was suddenly stunned, his brows furrowed, his eyes widened a little, and he couldn't help but uttered, "Isn't this?" The wild beast whose rank Li Ming couldn't sense was more looked drowsy at this time. His hazy eyes slightly opened, and he glanced at the gap in the bamboo cage, first looking at Lamont angrily, and roaring cluck cluck. Compared with the other 3 wild beasts, More seemed unusually irritable, but its cry was incomprehensible to ordinary aliens. But Li Ming, who had spiritual civilization, could hear it clearly. More was shouting, "Damn it, do you know who I am? I'm a star beast. Idiot. Let me out." Lamont turned his eyes and looked at More, and directly scolded, "You beast, how dare you scream." The powerful 7th level civilization aura, coupled with the fierce eyes, immediately made More quiet down. He curled up and leaned against a corner of the bamboo cage, not daring to make any sound. He just looked at Lamont with fear and anger. However, in the blink of an eye, More's eyes suddenly lit up and saw Li Ming beside Lamont. He suddenly burst into ecstasy and cried out cluck cluck with a wronged face and a bit of excitement. His 2 wings grabbed 2 bamboo joints like 2 hands, and his head poked out from the gap between the bamboo joints. His blinking eyes almost shed tears, and he prayed, was uneasy, and hoped. All kinds of expressions changed in his eyes. Huh. Lamont looked at More with angry eyes again. Seeing Lamont's eyes, Moore shrank back in panic and returned to the corner of the bamboo cage. His slightly trembling body dared not make any sound, and he just looked at Li Ming with humble eyes. Seeing Moore calm down, Lamont's expression returned to normal. His eyes looked at Li Ming and said, "These 4 are the wild beasts needed to participate in Falling Rice Gate." Li Ming's eyes kept looking at Moore, and he didn't know why this high and mighty star beast ended up in such a situation. At this moment, Li Ming did not show any extra expression in front of Lamont, but turned to Lamont again. Li Ming glanced at the other 3 wild beasts with his eyes, and showed a puzzled look, and asked, "Do you need wild beasts to enter the Falling Rice Gate?" Lamont nodded slightly, and said, "Yes, after entering the Falling Rice Gate, the first passage is a Beast Trace Passage secluded path. Except for the Fenizi people, other outsiders who want to enter, that passage must be accompanied by wild beasts. Even we Florence people can't." "Oh, so that's how it is." Li Ming has understood, and nodded repeatedly. Lamont stepped forward a few steps to the 4 bamboo cages, and said, "These 4 wild beasts are exactly what I captured in the savage forest for this Falling Rice Gate operation. In addition to you, our Death Medicine clan will send 3 more people to participate. This time, I have high hopes for you, so you will choose the 4 captured wild beasts first." Lamont smiled slightly, and looked at Li Ming solemnly, as if his eyes really valued Li Ming very much. Li Ming was stunned for a moment, and quickly bowed his head and said respectfully, "How can I be so kind to the High Priest? I really can't bear it. I'd better leave this opportunity to other people. I'm afraid that I will delay the High Priest's important matter," Li Ming said with panic on his face. But Moore in the bamboo cage came to the edge of the bamboo cage again, holding the bamboo joints tightly with his 2 chicken wings, and stretched his head out of the bamboo joints, looking at Li Ming pleadingly, and said with his consciousness, "No, save me, save me." This voice sounded in Li Ming's mind, but Li Ming ignored Moore, and didn't even look at him, but just bowed in front of Lamont, with a respectful attitude. Lamont didn't notice Moore's thoughts at all. He just looked at Li Ming. He was very satisfied with Li Ming's attitude, but still said, "You don't have to worry about this. It's enough for you to try your best. Besides, the other participants are of our biological civilization after all. Taming animals is easier for them than for you. Okay, it's settled. You can choose. There is no need to refuse this matter," Lamont said again. Chapter 112 Conspiracy. Lamont was firm in his attitude, and since he had said so much, Li Ming naturally couldn't refuse any more, so he could only reply, "Okay, then I will be the first to choose." With that, Li Ming came to the 4 bamboo cages, looked around and began to look at them one by one. The first bamboo cage contained a wild beast that looked like a dog. It was also the strongest of the 4 wild beasts, with a 3rd level strength. It looked ferocious on the outside, but it was in a panic in the cage, as if it was very scared. Li Ming took a rough look and went directly to the 2nd cage. In this cage was a 2nd level wild beast that looked like a pig. It lay in the middle of the cage motionless, with a pair of eyes moving back and forth, constantly checking the surrounding situation. "Brother, can you choose me? Save me." I will definitely repay you," Moore said with his consciousness, and this sentence rang in Li Ming's mind. Li Ming looked as if he hadn't heard it at all. After looking at the wild beast that looked like a pig, he came to the 3rd bamboo cage. In this bamboo cage is a wild beast that looks like a rabbit, but it is not as docile as a rabbit. It is relatively large, and has a 2nd level strength. Li Ming looked at the wild rabbit beast in front of him with a hesitant expression, and at the same time his eyes turned back to the wild beast that looked like a pig, as if he was hesitating between the 2. Seeing this, Moore was very angry, but he could do nothing about it. He could only continue to speak with his consciousness. "Well, we may have had some misunderstandings before, but you can't just stand by and watch someone die. After all, we have cooperated before. You can't just stand by and watch someone die like this." Li Ming still looked like he didn't hear anything. He touched his chin with one hand and looked at the wild pig beast, then at the wild rabbit beast, but didn't look at Moore. Lamont seemed to see through Li Ming's thoughts and stepped forward and said, "These 2 are 2nd level wild beasts. It is a bit difficult for someone like you who has no biological civilization to tame them. Of course, this also depends on your talent. If you are talented and can learn some intermediate level beast taming skills, you will have some chance of success, Lamont said. Li Ming turned around and bowed his head. After nodding, he replied, Disciple is also hesitating about this. Although I'm an outsider, now that I have joined Fuller Star, I'm honored to be accepted into your clan. Naturally, I don't want to disappoint you. Hearing what Li Ming said, Lamont smiled faintly. Before Lamont could say anything else, Moore became anxious and hurriedly said again, Blood contract. I want to connect a blood contract with you. Is this okay? Li Ming's eyes suddenly turned when he heard this and finally looked at Moore. The corners of his mouth rose slightly. He didn't say a word, but his consciousness replied, Connect a blood contract with me? As a high-level star beast, this won't be too unfair to you, right? After all, I'm a low-level creature from the outside world. It's not unfair. It's not unfair. It doesn't matter whether you are low-level or not. What if one day you become successful and advance to a high level? So this is not important. I'm willing. Moore hurriedly said again, after seeing Li Ming's eyes, fearing that Li Ming would not take him away. Li Ming looked at Moore in front of him and smiled with satisfaction. At this time, Lamont noticed Li Ming's expression, took 2 steps forward to Moore's bamboo cage, and said, Well, although this wild beast has no level and is relatively weak, it must be very easy to tame. If you choose this, the probability of taming it will definitely be higher. Li Ming smiled and bowed and said, Disciple is also thinking about this right now. Instead of choosing the second level strength, it is better to choose this one without a level. Although it looks a little ugly, it is easier to tame after all, just in case. Disciple will choose it. After Li Ming finished speaking, he reached out and picked up the bamboo cage on the ground. Lamont nodded with satisfaction and said, Okay, then this beast will be handed over to you. Li Ming raised the cage. His eyes kept looking at Moore inside from the gaps between the bamboo joints and showed a proud smile. Moore looked helpless and just lay quietly inside without moving, but his expression was much more relaxed and the previous fear and worry were completely gone. The wild beast has been selected. I still have something to tell you, Lamont said solemnly with a stern expression. Li Ming quickly put down the bamboo cage and looked at him respectfully. The wild beast is the key to the passage in and out of the secret realm of the Falling Rice Gate. As for whether it has other uses in the depths of the secret realm, I'm not sure. You should communicate more with Xenia on this point. It may be of great help to you. Also, since you have obtained the wild beast, you should concentrate on practicing the beast taming star book these days and tame the beast as soon as possible, so that you can be prepared to enter the Falling Rice Gate at any time, Lamont said with instructions. Li Ming bowed his head and bowed deeply and replied, Disciple, remember, I must not let the high priest down. Lamont nodded with satisfaction and said, Then you go back first. I will let Clean arrange it for you and send you the required beast taming star book. You just need to concentrate on practicing, and it is best not to walk around. Yes, then. I will take my leave. Lamont waved his hand casually, without saying anything. Li Ming bowed and stepped back, leaving the room with the bamboo cage. As soon as Li Ming went out, the portal flashed green, and another figure walked out. It was Clean. After Lamont glanced at Clean, his face suddenly became solemn. His eyes revealed a sinister look, and he slowly said, Is Li Ming outside? Yes. Arrange a place for him to live, and then send him the beast taming star book. Let him practice well during this period, and don't walk around. It's best to send someone to keep an eye on him. Lamont's sinister eyes seemed to contain some plan. Clean didn't dare to speculate anymore, so he could only bow his head and saluted, and replied, Yes, I'll do it right away. Wait. Clean's body, which was just about to turn, suddenly stopped and looked at Lamont in confusion. Lamont's mouth twitched slightly, and he said in a low voice, This time, the Gate of Falling Rice is only to obtain the star status of the Phase people. You are the captain of this operation. You must make full use of the relationship between Li Ming and Xenia to find the star status as soon as possible. Once the star status is obtained, Li Ming, the foreigner, does not need to come out. He still has a piece of star flame on his body. Remember to bring it back to me. Lamont's face was gloomy, and he spoke slowly word by word. Clean was stunned for a moment, but immediately understood what Lamont meant, and said in a firm voice, "Don't worry, High Priest, I will definitely handle it properly. But why is there a star flame on his body? I gave it to him to temporarily appease him, but I just told you, you just understand it," Lamont said again. Clean's mouth corners rose slightly, and he replied, "I understand, then I will withdraw first." Lamont did not reply, but just waved his hand casually. Clean bowed and withdrew. Chapter 113 Bloodline Contract. Inside a branch at the end of the giant tree, the long branches formed a long room. From the window, you can see all the scenery outside. The facilities in the house are also very complete. Li Ming was arranged here. Clean put a piece of starbook on the table in the room, then turned to Li Ming and smiled, saying, "It will take some time to enter the gate of falling rice. You can concentrate on practicing the contents of the starbook during this time. After all, you are a foreigner, and it will be more difficult to learn the contents inside, so you'd better spend more time and study hard. Don't let down the High Priest's expectations of you. I have placed soldiers at your door. If there is anything, you can tell them. Also, this is a military tree after all, so you'd better not walk around." Clean repeatedly instructed, with a happy face. Li Ming saluted first, then replied, "Disciple, remember, I will study the starbook with all my strength, and not let High Priest Lamont down." Clean nodded with satisfaction, and then turned and left. As soon as Clean left, Li Ming immediately breathed a sigh of relief, and his whole body completely relaxed. In front of the aliens with high-level civilizations everywhere, Li Ming was not only cautious, but also tense, and dared not relax at any time. Now in this room, it can be said that Li Ming is alone and free. Li Ming looked at the various facilities in the room, his eyes full of curiosity. Li Ming had never seen the alien supplies before. He could only look at them in other rooms before, but now Li Ming could take a closer look at any time. Just as Li Ming was full of curiosity, a flash of thought flashed through his mind, as if he suddenly thought of something, and suddenly his body paused, and his eyes looked at the bamboo cage on the ground. Li Ming chuckled twice, took 2 steps forward, and picked up the bamboo cage on the ground. Looking at Moore, who was temporarily well behaved inside, he snorted and put it on the table. Li Ming sat down at the table, and looked at him with satisfaction. "Hey, isn't this the high and mighty star beast?" Li Ming's mouth corners slightly raised, one hand casually tapping on the table, looking particularly relaxed and at ease. In the cage, Moore smiled bitterly, blinking his eyes constantly, looking at Li Ming and saying, "Things are different now. I'm very grateful that you can save me. Why don't we make a deal? Trade?" Li Ming looked at him with contempt, without saying anything more, just looking at Moore. "Well, it's like this. Even if this bloodline contract is connected, what good can it do for you? I might as well give you some items that can help you, and you just need to let me go," Moore said thoughtfully, as if he really had some treasure on him. "Hehe." Li Ming chuckled several times in a row, shaking his head while laughing, but the laughter suddenly stopped as soon as it started, and Li Ming's face suddenly became ugly, as if a layer of frost had condensed. "It seems that you don't really want to belong to me. You still dare to bargain with me when things have come to this?" Li Ming's stern expression revealed a fierce look, as if he really wanted to kill this little guy. Seeing Li Ming's face suddenly change, Moore immediately realized something. Although his expression did not change, he couldn't help but secretly said in his heart, "This guy is really not easy to deal with." Li Ming narrowed his eyes, slowly stood up, and said, "Do you remember your laughter when I first proposed the blood contract? At that time, you almost laughed and cried." At this point, Li Ming's head suddenly turned, staring at the other party angrily, and said viciously, "Tell me, you are a white striped chicken, and you are an alien. What right do you have to laugh at me? Dare you talk to me about conditions? Either you connect the blood contract obediently today, or I will roast you and eat you." Li Ming's angry expression did not seem to be a joke. Moore shrank back, his eyes widened in fear, and he said repeatedly, okay, I'll listen to you, and connect the blood contract." Although he said so, Moore was still full of reluctance in his heart. While agreeing with Li Ming, he secretly said, "Let's save our lives first." Li Ming nodded with satisfaction, smiled slightly, and said, "That's more or less." As he said so, Li Ming slowly raised his right hand, and a ball of white energy gathered in his palm. Then the skin of his palm began to glow red, and red threads sprang out from the skin of his palm. These red filaments were the essence of blood, which was integrated with Li Ming's consciousness. At this moment, they were being pushed out of the skin one by one, and entered the energy ball condensed in the palm. Looking at the ball, Li Ming was full of pride, and whispered secretly, after the blood contract is connected, I'm not afraid of this guy playing tricks. If I can really give birth to star feathers in the future, it will naturally be a good thing, and save a lot of trouble. Mo stared at the energy ball on Li Ming's palm, and occasionally looked at Li Ming. His expression did not change, but he gritted his teeth in his heart. I really can't accept that I'm controlled by a low-level creature like this. The energy ball condensed in Li Ming's palm began to slowly turn red, and the blood threads were like swimming fish turning over and over in it. The skin on the palm no longer had blood oozing out, and the blood essence was condensed. Energy, blood, and consciousness, the three things have completely gathered together. Li Ming dragged this thing with his right hand, and placed it in front of the bamboo cage. At the same time, he looked at Mo and said, receive it. Mo's expression was sluggish, and he seemed to be still a little hesitant, but his body had slowly come to the front of the bamboo cage. The blood contract has a strong binding ability, and is the most binding of all contracts between lives. This is also the biggest advantage of this contract. But the disadvantage is that this kind of contract must be consensual, and can only be carried out under voluntary circumstances. If one party is unwilling, then this kind of contract cannot be completed. Simply put, the contracting party must voluntarily accept the consciousness in it. Mo looked at the bright red energy ball, sighed slightly, closed his eyes, and slowly opened his mouth. Li Ming took advantage of the situation, and pushed his right hand forward. The red energy ball was sucked into Mo's mouth like a puff of smoke and disappeared. Of course, this is not over yet. Devouring is only the first step. The second step is the most critical. Now it depends on whether Mo accepts the control of this consciousness. Li Ming stared at Mo quietly, as if waiting for something. After a moment, Li Ming suddenly showed a smile at the corner of his mouth, nodded with satisfaction, and said, it seems that you really accepted this blood contract. If you knew this earlier, why did you do it in the first place? Obeying me will be of great benefit to you. The blood contract has been connected. From now on, you and I are inseparable partners. As Li Ming spoke, he stretched out his hands and slowly opened the bamboo cage. Li Ming could clearly sense the consciousness in Mo's body, as if Mo was a part of his body. He could feel Mo's heartbeat, blood flow, and various functions of his body. Mo walked out of the cage slowly, with a somewhat frustrated expression. After looking at Li Ming, he shook his head helplessly. Li Ming glanced at him and said again, now you will be with me all day long. In the future, we will have to take care of each other and help each other. I say this, which is enough to respect you. I hope you can put down your high and mighty frame, and get along well with me. If you make trouble, it will not be good for you. Before the blood contract was connected, Li Ming was still angry and fierce, as if he was going to eat Mo alive. But after the blood contract was connected, Li Ming's attitude was completely reversed. He was also gentle and respectful to Mo. This change in attitude seemed to Mo to be just a superficial effort. He could only sigh again and said nothing. Mo was also very clear that he was now under the control of Li Ming. Any rude or arrogant remarks might lead to Li Ming's dissatisfaction, and he would inevitably suffer some hardships. It would be better to be at ease and obey orders. Mo did not reply. Li Ming could more or less guess some of his little thoughts, but Li Ming did not care too much. Instead, he turned around and came to a round mount and slowly sat down. With his eyes slightly closed, various thoughts began to emerge in his mind bit by bit. Regarding Mo, the contract has been connected, so there is no need to take it to heart. Li Ming only wants the future Xingaiu. At present, as long as this guy does not cause trouble, it is enough. After all, under the constraints of the contract, the other party dare not act rashly. In addition, regarding the Xingaian that he just got, plus the Xingian Xingai that he got before, Li Ming's mind has emerged a vague memory about the synthesis of Xingaiao. This memory is the fragments of Emma that Li Ming swallowed at the beginning. Because of the gathering of these three things, it slowly appeared, but it was relatively vague, not as clear and skillful as when Zingy was synthesized. Hiss. Li Ming took a deep breath and said to himself, Emma's memory of star glory synthesis is so vague. It seems that this guy's synthesis ability is not strong enough. The three things are not easy to get together. You can't do anything without being 100% sure. Thinking of this, Li Ming couldn't help but frown slightly. The things are ready, and now all that's left is the synthesis. It can be said that he is only one step away from advancing to the 6th level civilization. The more he is at this time, the more anxious he can't be. Li Ming still needs to make more preparations, and can't make any mistakes. Chapter 114, Sorting and Leading the Way. Philostar belongs to the biological civilization race. The ability of synthesis is the main ability of the Fixie people. The purpose of going to the Zumi Gate is to find the secret star book hidden in it. Li Ming is also one of the participants in this activity. Although the materials for synthesizing star glory have been collected, Li Ming's vague memory makes him not very sure. Therefore, Li Ming must find the star book about synthesis ability in the Zumi Gate this time. Thinking of this, Li Ming's eyes have already opened. There is no one in the empty room. Only Moore is lying quietly on the table, looking leisurely. In addition to Moore, there is also a star book on the table. This star book is the beast training star book left by Clean. It is mainly for Li Ming to use it to tame Moore, but it seems that there is no need for this now. At this moment, the portal in the distance suddenly flashed, and three figures walked out of it. The leader is short, and it is Xenia, and behind her are two 6th level mentors, Clean and Thor. Li Ming hurriedly stood up and bowed to the two. Clean waved his hand and was about to say something when he was suddenly attracted by Moore on the table. He showed a bit of surprise, and after a cautious look at Li Ming, he said, "What's going on? Why did you let this wild beast out? It's very dangerous before it's tamed." Clean looked a little flustered and said sternly. Moore's eyes rolled when he heard this, and his body suddenly stood up from his prone position and walked on the table step by step, sometimes lowering his head and pecking at the table with his mouth intentionally or unintentionally, and occasionally grabbing something on the table with a sharp claw. He stopped, looked up and looked around, and scratched the table with a chicken claw intentionally or unintentionally, like a chicken looking for food. Li Ming turned around and looked at Moore on the table, then turned his gaze back to Clean and said, "Disciple has already tamed this beast, so I released it." Huh. Clean was slightly surprised. He looked at Moore on the table carefully, then looked at Li Ming again with an incredible expression on his face, and muttered, "Already tamed? So fast? Ah, that's right. This wild beast is of a lower level, not like those 2nd and 3rd level wild beasts. Disciples' qualifications are limited, so I chose this beast, and it will be easier to tame it," Li Ming explained hurriedly. Clean's expression relaxed, and he nodded slightly. He really couldn't sense Moore's level, so he didn't care about it anymore. He turned his eyes to Xenia beside him and said, "Xenia, aren't you going to tell Li Ming about the wild beast? You can tell it now." Xenia blinked, looked at Li Ming in confusion, and said, "Brother Li Ming, are you going to enter the gate of Drami?" Li Ming smiled lightly, looked at Xenia with his eyes, leaned over and squatted, and said, "Now I'm also a member of the Philostar, so everything must be arranged by the High Priest. The High Priest asked me to enter the gate of Drami, so naturally I can't refuse." Xenia nodded her little head lightly, then looked up at Thor beside her, and said, "Since you have decided to enter the gate of Drami, everything must be done according to the rules of our Fixie people. Uncle Thor knows this very well, so I came here today to tell you this." "Oh." Li Ming nodded slowly, then stood up, looked at Thor, and showed a puzzled look. Thor smiled and said, "That's right. In our Fixie tribe, if you want to enter the Zumi Gate, there will be a certain order. After the first section of the Zumi Gate is opened, only 9 people can be transported at a time. In the second section, there are multiple channels. These channels require tamed wild beasts to lead the way, so the cooperation of the wild beasts is crucial. We call this sequencing and leading the way, and it needs to be decided before entering. The method of decision is also very simple, that is, the people entering let their wild beasts negotiate." Thor said slowly word by word. Li Ming frowned slightly and showed a puzzled look. He whispered, "Let the wild beasts negotiate." Thor nodded gently and said, "Uncivilized creatures have their own unique way of communication. Let them sort themselves. When they reach the second section, they can distribute themselves." At that time, at this point, Li Ming has understood that the first two sections of the Zumi gate are very dependent on wild beasts. Li Ming is not sure why, but since there is such an arrangement, Li Ming does not need to be shy. Clean glanced at Li Ming at this time, and without waiting for Thor to continue, he said forcefully, "Since your wild beast has been tamed, you just need to wait for notification. The wild beasts of other personnel have not been tamed yet. I will personally inform you about sorting and guiding." Clean seemed very anxious, and his sudden interruption immediately caused Xenia's dissatisfaction. She squinted her eyes and glared at him, saying, "Can't you wait for Uncle Thor to finish speaking?" Seeing this, Thor immediately said, "Uncle Clean is right. It doesn't matter who says it. There is no need to care about it." Xenia then turned her eyes to Thor and said unsatisfiedly, "That's different. The Gate of Falling Rice is a major event for us Fenizi people. All participants must have a deep understanding of this." Clean's expression suddenly eased a little. After glancing at Thor, he said, "Then you can continue." Thor smiled lightly, then shook his head slightly, and continued, "Everything that needs to be said has been said. Since Li Ming has tamed the wild beast, we just need to wait for sorting and guiding." Xenia snorted at this time, took 2 steps forward to Li Ming, grabbed the corner of Li Ming's clothes, and said, "They are pushing and shoving, and can't talk about important things, so let me tell you." Li Ming smiled slightly, leaned over and squatted, staring at Xenia with his soft eyes, without saying a word. Xenia's big eyes flashed twice, and then said, "Brother Li Ming, there are 3 sections in the Falling Rice Gate, also called 3 sections of passages. Except for the first section, the next 2 sections are extremely dangerous. When you get inside, you must follow me closely. The most important one is the 3rd section of the passage. That's where the star records are stored, but it's guarded by the giant beast Isaac." While Xenia was talking, Clean couldn't help but prick up his ears, as if he was extremely concerned about the content inside. But Xenia suddenly stopped talking here. She looked around at the people around her, and suddenly stopped talking. She leaned forward slightly, put her mouth close to Li Ming's ear, and whispered, "I will tell you slowly, when we enter the Falling Rice Gate." Li Ming nodded slightly, with a smile on his face, but still said nothing. Although he didn't say a word, Li Ming had already recorded the information that just appeared in Xenia's mind in detail with his wisdom. Li Ming already knew a lot about the Falling Rice Gate. "Okay, that's it. We'll talk about it when we meet." Xenia smiled and said, turning back to Thor's side. Thor was about to say something, but suddenly stopped talking, and his eyes couldn't help but look at Clean. Clean glanced back at Thor, but did not speak. Thor received Clean's look and said, "Well, we have said what we need to say. Should we go back, Xenia?" Xenia glanced at Li Ming, blinking her eyes slightly, as if conveying some information. Then she turned around and walked outside while saying, "Then let's go." Li Ming smiled faintly, watching the 3 people leave the room through the portal, but when he thought of Xenia's last look, he couldn't help but frown, as if he saw something, and whispered softly, "Did she know something?" Whispering like this, Li Ming couldn't help but shake his head slightly, and he couldn't figure out the reason for a while. After a slight sigh, he stopped thinking about it. In the following time, no one came to Li Ming's residence, and Li Ming didn't go out. In his spare time, Li Ming kept recalling the various star books recorded in his mind, hoping to achieve some success. The star book that Li Ming studied was mainly the one he saw in Norma's room. Compared with the beast taming star book sent by Clean, the one in Norma's room was naturally more advanced. The more advanced it was, the more difficult it was to learn. Li Ming was limited by the level of civilization, and could not learn much, but with his own spiritual civilization, he still mastered some advanced beast taming abilities. In addition to repeatedly practicing and learning star books, Li Ming also tried to piece together the memory fragments in his brain, hoping to gain more cognition. These things are easy to say, but extremely difficult to do. Fortunately, Li Ming had nothing to do at the moment, so he just took it as a way to kill time and operated slowly. Li Ming was leisurely sorting out his thoughts in his mind, but some disciples of the four major races of Florence were busy and nervous. These people were the candidates to enter the Falling Rice Gate this time. Among them, Clean of the Death Medicine clan was one of the participants. At this time, Clean stayed alone in a room, his eyes focused, his attention concentrated, and used the green light released from his right hand to shine on the bamboo cage. Inside the bamboo cage was the dog-like third-level wild beast. Clay was concentrating on taming it at the moment. Chapter 115, Sorting Hall. The green light flashed, and it held the hound beast tightly like a beam of light rope, while the green light energy was still transmitting consciousness. Clean's face was solemn at this moment, and even a few drops of sweat flowed down his forehead. He didn't dare to breathe, and looked very exhausted. After a while, the hound beast suddenly roared, and its eyes blinked and glowed green. Its original aggressive look immediately subsided, and its body lay on the ground obediently without moving. Seeing this, Clean retracted his arm, and the green light stopped. He wiped the sweat from his forehead slightly, and breathed a sigh of relief. Finally succeeded. Looking at the docile hound in front of him, Clean showed a faint smile, and at this moment, the portal at the door suddenly flashed. Clean turned his eyes, looked at the portal, and suddenly raised his right hand, shooting a green light from his fingertips. The green light entered the portal like a bullet. The entire portal flashed again, and a figure walked out from it. The person who came was Thor. As soon as he entered the room, Thor came to Clean respectfully with a smile on his face, bowed his head and said, "Brother Clean, am I ready?" "Oh." Clean showed a bit of surprise. He turned around, went back to the table and sat down, and said casually, "Tell me about it." "Yes, Xenia of the Fallen Rice Gate has explained everything, and my second level rabbit beast has been completely tamed. Everything is ready, only the east wind is missing," Thor said proudly. Clean was also extremely happy to hear this, and he stood up and shouted okay. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Clean showed a look of doubt again. He looked at Thor closely and said, "Thor, this time the High Priest made an exception, and allowed you to enter the Gate of Falling Rice. You should know the intention of this." Thor nodded repeatedly and said, "I understand this. Although Xenia has told us all the secrets in the Gate of Falling Rice, to be on the safe side, we still have to take Li Ming with us. On this trip, I will do my best to help the High Priest retrieve the star status, and make our Death Medicine clan successful," Thor said firmly, as if the star status in that secret realm was already within reach. Clean nodded in satisfaction, and then said, "This is the best, but I'm still worried about that little girl Xenia. She refused to enter the Falling Rice Gate before, but now she is taking the initiative to prepare for this matter, and even arrange the sorting and guiding. It is indeed a bit strange." Sol heard this, and hesitated for a while, then said, "I also had some doubts at first, but she is just a little girl. After entering the Falling Rice Gate, everything will be out of her control. Even if she hides something, she is under our control." Well, that's true. Clean's doubts gradually faded, and after his eyes rolled slightly, he said, "Then you go and tell Xenia to start the sorting and guiding as soon as possible, otherwise there will be chaos." "Yes." Sol agreed and bowed and left the room. Clean showed a strange look, then stood up and walked towards the portal. The order of leading the way is a branch of the second section of the passage of the Falling Rice Gate. Although all of them can reach the entrance of the third section, some roads are extremely dangerous, while others are relatively safe. As for the choice of the intersection, it is up to the wild beast to make the decision. This is the important reason for bringing the wild beast into the Falling Rice Gate. There are many forks in the second section of the passage, and the wild beasts may also have disputes, so the order will be chosen before entering. On a certain trunk of the military tree, many people stood next to a round tree knot. The tree knot was like an ancient castle, more than 10 meters high and 7 or 8 meters wide. There were more than a dozen steps between the entrance gate and the trunk, which was somewhat similar to the central tree fort. The people around the tree knot were from the 4 major races, and their ranks were relatively high. Li Ming stood beside Clean and carefully observed the surroundings. Except for the 4th level soldiers, they were basically the 6th level instructors. Li Ming looked at the many high level instructors, frowned slightly, and thought to himself, all the 6th level civilizations participated in the Falling Rice Gate. Just as Li Ming saw, the 6th level instructors of the 4 major races were standing not far away with their tamed wild beasts. The entrance to the tree knot is a dark doorway. Looking from the outside, you can't see anything except the darkness, but you can always feel a strange atmosphere inside. This looks too simple. It can't be compared with our Fixie people at all. Xenia looked at the tree knot and said with some dissatisfaction, pouting her mouth, as if she was a little angry. Clean next to him glanced at Xenia with the corner of his eyes and snorted. This sorting hall is planned according to your wishes. It looks a little simple on the outside, but the facilities inside are not less. Humph. It's not as good as ours, right, Uncle Sol? Xenia snuggled up to Sol and said so. Sol looked down at Xenia, smiled lightly, and said nothing more. At this time, a figure suddenly walked out of the dark door of the tree knot, attracting the attention of everyone present. But when everyone saw it clearly, the originally restless atmosphere immediately quieted down, and those who were still talking also shut up. Standing at the door of the tree knot was High Priest Lamont. Today we will hold a ceremony for the Fixie people here, which is ordering and leading the way, and it is also a preparation for entering the Zumi Gate in the future. The Zumi Gate belongs to both the Fixie people and our Star. In this operation, Princess Xenia of the Fixie people and Mentor Thor of the Fixie people will participate, so this Zumi Gate can be said to be a collective action of our Star people. Taking back the things of the Zumi Gate and reviving the prestige of the Star people is what we should do. I hope that everyone who participates in this operation will do their best and return triumphantly. Lamont said loudly while standing on the high steps, and the people below also pricked up their ears and listened carefully. Yes, we will definitely return triumphantly. Revitalize the prestige of Star. Clean suddenly shouted from the crowd, and this shout quickly resonated. Return triumphantly. Restore prestige. Return triumphantly. Restore prestige. Shouts rang out in the crowd, but some people said one thing and meant another, and some people sneered and looked down on them. The crowd seemed harmonious on the surface, but each of them was fighting in their hearts. Xenia just snorted coldly, without even looking at Lamont. Lamont slowly waved his hand, and the voice stopped. Okay, time is running out, and the sorting and guiding will officially begin next. I will repeat the rules. All wild beasts tamed by the participants will be placed in this sorting hall, and then let them compete among themselves. Whoever comes out first will be ranked first. Lamont said this, and his eyes swept around, as if to indicate something. Clean and Thor were the first to stand out, each holding a bamboo cage in their hands, standing on the steps without saying a word, waiting for other people to come up. Li Ming was about to step forward, but just as he took a step, he suddenly stopped, and Mo's voice rang in his mind. Can I give up? I don't want to stay with those brainless wild beasts. Li Ming hesitated when he heard this, but Clean had already noticed the step Li Ming took. He glanced at Li Ming with his eyes and said, why don't you come up? Li Ming sighed slightly and had no choice but to continue walking up the stairs. Alas, when will this boring life end? It's too hard for me. Mo lay in the bamboo cage and said to himself in frustration. As soon as Li Ming went up, the other 3 tribes started to move, and soon, all 9 people stood on the stairs. Lamont turned around, looked at the black doorway, and said, I have checked the facilities inside. Whoever's wild beast comes out first has the right to make the decision. Let's start. As soon as he finished speaking, Clean took the lead in opening the bamboo cage, and pointed at the doorway. Go. A wild beast that looked like a hunting dog flew out of the bamboo cage, and disappeared in the dark doorway in a blink of an eye. Then, the wild beasts of other people also rushed into the doorway one after another. However, only Li Ming's Mo was not in a hurry. He stopped every step, and walked slowly inside. Not only that, Mo had a disdainful expression on his face, and made a strange clucking sound from his mouth. All the wild beasts disappeared in an instant, and only Mo was still walking step by step. The originally nervous atmosphere of scrambling made Mo's slow pace a little awkward. Clean's face suddenly froze, his eyes looked directly at Li Ming, and he shouted in a low voice, Li Ming. What's wrong with you? Li Ming hurriedly bowed his head and whispered, disciple will make it faster. Hurry up. Don't embarrass me. Li Ming shouted with his consciousness, and Mo's pace suddenly paused. After a cold snort, he flapped his wings and ran in. As soon as Moore entered the hall, Lamont nodded slightly, then turned around and looked at the other people at the bottom of the steps again. His eyes moved and finally stopped on Xenia. Xenia, the sorting and guiding has begun according to the rules of you Fixie people. You will decide after the results come out. Once the sorting and guiding is over, the gate of falling rice will be officially opened. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116, The Tamer Tribe's Plan. The Tree Knot Sorting Hall. From the outside it was pitch black inside, but the sight inside was exceptionally clear. Moore stood inside the palace and hesitated, because there were more than a dozen forks in the road in front of Moore. These forks were arranged by Lamont in advance, mainly to confuse the sight and hearing of the wild beasts, so that they could not make the right choice. Moore was naturally not an ordinary wild beast. At this moment, looking at these intersections, something suddenly occurred to him. From Xenia's memory, most of the second section of the passage are dangerous roads. If I choose a dangerous road, once Li Ming, the idiot, dies, won't I be free? Thinking of this, Moore put a wing on his chin and couldn't help but smile proudly again. A light snap sound came out, and Moore's head, which was thinking, seemed to be slapped by this person, and he rolled over and fell to the ground. Damn. Who is so bold? Moore angrily clucked several times, turned around and raised a pair of wings, grinning with an angry look. But when he turned around, Moore's expression immediately relaxed, and his ferocious posture completely disappeared. Next to Moore was a wild beast similar to a monkey, but it had a pair of wings on its back, and its eyes looked at Moore fiercely. Moore looked at the other person's eyes tremblingly, and those eyes were like the clear surface of a lake, reflecting a picture. In the picture, the two were standing opposite each other, talking about something. Fitch, this black crow ape has been domesticated by you since it was a child. It is different from those captured wild beasts. Over the years, your consciousness has been connected to each other a lot. This time, whether you can kill Li Ming's wild beast is very important in the sorting and guiding. A slightly taller alien said meaningfully. Fitch bowed his head, nodded repeatedly, and replied, High Priest Norma, please rest assured. Once the sorting guide is turned on, even if Li Ming's wild beast cannot be killed, it will be the last one. Norma nodded with satisfaction, and then said, This time I sent you and Ellis to go for the synthetic star status of the Phasey people, but I still need to reiterate the specific plan to you. After entering, don't confront other races head on, especially the Death Medicine clan. After all, there are 4 of them, but you must use the advantages of our beast taming plan. Your black crow ape cooperates with Ellis's spirit feather to eliminate all their wild beasts as much as possible. Without wild beasts, even if they get star status, they can only stay inside, and you who have wild beasts are the only ones who have the ability to enter and exit. Of course, if we can kill Li Ming's wild beast before entering, it will also be beneficial to us. Norma said slowly, but his tone was full of viciousness. Fitch nodded repeatedly, with a smug look on his face, as if he had a plan in mind. The scene was displayed in the eyes of the black crow ape in front of him. It was exactly what the wild beast saw, and recorded in its mind. Of course, in addition to these, there was also the command that Fitch gave it alone, which was directed at Moore. This black crow ape was not an ordinary wild beast, but a 4th level strength. It can be said that this strength is the top existence among these wild beasts, and its ability is naturally extraordinary. Moore looked at the other party's eyes, and his expression instantly became ugly. He secretly said, This is bad. This guy actually wants to kill me. Li Ming, this stupid guy, must not have thought that I'm in danger. Whispering like this, Moore became more nervous, looking at the black crow ape with a worried look on his face. As a 4th level strength wild beast, it is not easy to tame the black crow ape. Even Fitch, a 6th level instructor of the beast taming tribe, does not have this ability, but the main combat power of the beast taming tribe comes from wild beasts, and they have a set of methods to tame high level wild beasts. Moore used his wisdom to detect from the other party's consciousness that these high-level wild beasts were not directly tamed, but were cultivated from childhood, fed with his blood essence energy, so that their consciousness was controlled little by little. Wild beasts tamed in this way are often more loyal, more determined, and obey their master's orders without hesitation. Even if they use external abilities, it is difficult to completely interfere. In this way, it is even more impossible for Moore's wisdom to control the other party. Damn it, run first. Moore suddenly turned around, flapping his wings frantically while running towards somewhere. Although there were many passages not far away, he didn't care about choosing at the moment. He just found a passage to hide in. The black crow ape was not slow at all. He exerted force on his legs on the ground and jumped directly more than 10 meters away. The figure came in front of Moore with just a rise and fall, blocking Moore's way. Unable to enter the passage, Moore turned and ran out of the door. It was easy to enter the ranking hall, but it was difficult to leave. According to the setting of the hall, there would be an energy barrier at the door. After all the wild beasts entered, the energy barrier would be activated, and no wild beasts could come out at this time. In order to be the first to come out, you must choose a fork in the road with a barrier key from among the many passages. The wild beasts who get the key can come out from this entrance first, which means they are ranked first. Moore's Wukong ability saw the effect of this barrier at a glance. At the moment, he could not care too much for the sake of saving his life. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the Wukong ability was activated. Moore was running in front, and the black crow ape was desperately chasing behind, with an expression that he wanted to tear Moore into pieces. Wukong ability is completely different from Huan ability. Although Moore did not fully master the use of this ability, he completely surpassed Li Ming in the use of it. This ability to unlock the barrier is one of his abilities. Suddenly, a certain area in the empty door in front of him was rippled. Wukong's powerful consciousness ability had been activated. This area was like a calm lake, and under the effect of Wukong's ability, it was constantly rippling, like a stone thrown into the water. Moore smiled proudly. Humph, this small barrier still can't stop me. The proud Moore ran 2 steps and suddenly jumped, his body like a fish about to jump out of the barrier. At this time, Lamont outside the gate seemed to sense something, and suddenly turned around and looked at the gate. He saw ripples on the door, as if something was about to run out. You got the key so quickly? Whose wild beast is it? Lamont whispered to himself, and at the same time, he tilted his eyes and looked at Ellis and Fitch not far away, because the two were mentors of the beast taming tribe, and it was normal for them to be ranked first, but it was too fast to come out now. Fitch and Ellis also looked at the direction of the door in surprise at this time, and they looked at each other from time to time, as if they couldn't understand it. Just as everyone was waiting to see which wild beast would come out first, the barrier ripples suddenly flashed and disappeared again. No wild beast ran out, and the barrier returned to calm. The appearance of this scene made everyone frown slightly, and showed a puzzled look. People outside did not know that, although Moore used Wukong to unlock a certain area of the barrier, his body that was about to touch the barrier suddenly stopped, as if he suddenly stepped on the brakes, and stopped in the air. When Moore noticed this, he was also a little puzzled. He flapped his wings a few times, but still did not respond. He wanted to use force in his legs, but felt stiff. No way. Moore's stiff head slowly turned back, and he saw that the black crow ape had already grabbed one of Moore's chicken claws with one hand. The black crow ape opened its mouth slightly, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. The smile of catching prey came from the inside, and the excitement in its heart could be clearly seen from the other party's eyes. Without waiting for Moore to react, the black crow ape swung its arm in an arc, and threw Moore to the ground like a sledgehammer. Pa! A sound was heard, and Moore's body and head hit the hard ground heavily. This impact made Moore dizzy, his eyes rolled back, and he looked like he was about to faint. Before Moore could react, a few pa sounds were heard, and the black crow ape was like playing with a toy, throwing Moore to the ground crazily from left to right, left to right. After a series of throws, the black crow ape was already panting, and threw Moore's body to the ground with a swing of his hand, looking at Moore constantly with his eyes. After a moment, he raised his foot, and scratched Moore with his toes. Moore's nose and face were swollen, and his white flesh was also blue and purple. He lay on the ground motionless, as if he was dead. After making sure that more was not moving, the black crow ape turned around and walked into a passage. The light footsteps were getting farther and farther away, and gradually there was no movement in his ears. The black crow ape had completely disappeared from the entrance of the passage, and the surroundings immediately returned to calm. There was no other object, except more lying quietly on the ground. One eye suddenly opened, while the other was still tightly closed. The eyeball of the open eye moved around, up, down, left, and right. After making sure that the surrounding environment was safe, Moore's other eye also slowly opened. It hurts. Chapter 117. Getting ready to go. There was no part of Moore's body that didn't hurt, and his head was swollen. He slowly got up and limped towards the door. As he walked slowly, Moore showed an extremely sad expression, as if tears were about to flow out. It's too difficult. When have I, a high-ranking star beast, ever suffered such grievances? Dragging his heavy body, taking difficult steps, showing an aggrieved expression, he moved out step by step until he stopped behind the barrier. Concentrating his mind and energy, he activated Hukong's ability again. The energy ripples in the barrier flashed again, and a passage was opened. Moore looked around carefully, and then walked out directly from this door. As soon as Moore walked out, he immediately attracted the attention of everyone, some of whom were incredible, and some of whom were unbelievable. Li Ming smiled slightly at first, but frowned again after a closer look. He moved and ran over directly, and gently lifted Moore with both hands. "What's going on?" Li Ming asked in confusion. Moore glanced at Li Ming fiercely. His anger was self-evident, but he did not lose his temper at the moment, just closed his eyes and said nothing. Seeing that Li Ming's wild beast came out first, Lamont immediately showed joy, chuckled twice, and said, "It seems that the first place in the ranking can be determined." Li Ming looked at the injured Moore, and felt a little sad. He did not care about the ranking at the moment. He suddenly turned around, bowed his head and saluted everyone, and said, "Mew. My wild beast is seriously injured. I want to take him back for treatment first." Lamont hesitated for a moment, looked at the others, nodded slightly, and said, "Well, go. The falling rice gate will be opened soon, and the wild beast cannot have any accidents." Li Ming bowed his head again and said, "Then I'll take my leave first." As soon as he finished speaking, Li Ming walked straight to the bottom of the stairs. Looking at Li Ming's leaving figure, the other 6-level mentors had different expressions, but since Lamont had spoken, these people naturally couldn't say anything more. After leaving this place, Li Ming took Moore back to his residence. As for the order and result of the attack, he naturally didn't care. The residence was quiet. As before, Li Ming's face was a little ugly. After coming to the table, he carefully placed Moore on the table and looked at his injuries carefully. The head and body were all red, swollen and bruised, as if someone had abused him. Li Ming frowned, his face showed anger, and he couldn't help but grit his teeth, and said in a low voice, "MD, you are so cruel to my partner?" Li Ming's face was extremely ugly. At the same time, his right hand slowly raised, and white energy slowly condensed in his palm. A memory in his mind had been extracted, which was the treatment method of the Light Medicine clan that he had learned at the beginning. This treatment method is the primary ability of the Light Medicine clan, which Li Ming learned before entering the magic cave. As soon as Li Ming activated it, the white sphere in his brain had already merged into it. With the amplification of this white sphere, the white energy on the palm quickly turned green. As soon as the palm turned over, the green energy ball slowly slid down like flowing water, covering Moore's body bit by bit. The soft green light enveloped Moore, and his body moved slightly, as if he felt Li Ming's treatment. Wherever the green energy passed, the damaged skin changed slightly, and the color changed from dark to slightly lighter. "Wow, so comfortable," Moore muttered to himself, with an expression of enjoyment on his head, as if he was unusually comfortable. Seeing the green light take effect and slowly disappear at the wound, Li Ming smiled, his mouth slightly raised, and then repeated the previous operation, condensing a green energy ball again. Although there was some effect, it was not very obvious. After all, it was only a primary treatment ability. Even if it was strengthened by the white sphere, it still could not achieve the effect of rapid healing. Li Ming could only condense and operate repeatedly. but during this period, Moore was in a comfortable and enjoyable posture, as if someone was massaging his whole body. The pain had completely disappeared, and the comfort of his body became stronger and stronger. Well, comfortable. I can't tell. This silly boy is really good at this, Moore said secretly in his heart, flapping his wings slightly and making a low and weak groan. Li Ming only focused on the repeated operation, and the energy in his body was also lost a little bit, but the redness and swelling on Moore's body did fade a lot. If this continued, it would not take long for the scar to completely disappear. Li Ming carefully took care of Moore, and watching the other's body gradually recover was also a kind of satisfaction from the heart. Although he had no feelings for Moore, such a little thing was covered with wounds, which always made Li Ming feel uneasy, and he even had a unique human compassion in his heart. However, Li Ming's continuous and excessive use of energy made Li Ming's face pale, and beads of sweat as big as beans kept flowing on his forehead. In addition to the consumption of energy, his mental strength also became tired. Time passed little by little, and before he knew it, the skylight had faded, and the night quietly fell. Moore lay on the table and fell asleep, and his mouth opened and closed, and even made bursts of snoring. Li Ming sat at the window, holding an energy star bag in his left hand, supporting his chin with his right hand, and looking at the night sky outside the window. There is no moon on full star at night, but the stars are very beautiful, because each star is unusually bright and dazzling, like a flashing diamond, which makes people feel happy and relaxed. Li Ming is recovering the energy lost in his body at this time, but his mind is completely immersed in the beautiful night sky. The darkness gradually faded, the light began to slowly emerge, the sky gradually rose, and before he knew it, a night had passed. The light shone through the window, and the whole room became brighter. Li Ming slowly opened his eyes, and he was still sitting by the window. Ah! A slowly elongated sound came out of his throat. After stretching, he stood up from his seat and muttered, "I actually slept here for a night. By the way, Moore." Li Ming turned his head hurriedly, and saw Moore holding a piece of star book with a pair of wings and watching it. "Are you awake?" Moore said while looking at the star book. Li Ming smiled slightly, nodded slightly at the energetic Moore, and said, "It seems you have fully recovered." Moore ignored Li Ming, snorted lightly and continued to look at the star book in his hand, but at this moment, the portal at the door suddenly flashed, and a figure walked in. It was Clean. Li Ming took 2 steps forward and bowed first. Clean waved his hand and ignored it, but when he saw Moore, his face suddenly became ugly. "Li Ming, how can such an important thing as the star book be played with by a wild beast? What if it is destroyed?" Clean said unhappily, and at the same time, waved his hand to take the star book in his hand. Li Ming glanced at Moore, and quickly apologized, saying self-reproachfully, "It is the fault of the disciples' lack of strict discipline. I hope the teacher." Forget it, I will pay attention next time. I came to you today for the falling rice gate. Come with me." Clean said coldly, and turned around, and left the room first. Li Ming did not dare to hesitate, picked up Moore on the table with one hand, and followed him out. After walking out of the portal, he walked straight along the tree trunk passage, until he stopped in front of a staircase extending upward. The skylight beam shone down from the hole at the top, and the area near the staircase was particularly bright. Clean stopped in front of the staircase, looked back at Li Ming, and said, "Li Ming, there is something I still need to explain to you, before we set off." Li Ming was surprised, staring at him without saying a word. "We will all enter the first section of the falling rice gate in a while. You should try to get close to Xenia, and try to ask some taboos in it, before entering the second section. After all, you are ranked first in the second section and the one who is most likely to get star status." Clean stared at Li Ming and said sternly. Li Ming bowed his head slightly, nodded slightly, and replied, "If Xenia is willing to tell me, I will tell you first. Although I'm ranked first, I'm not sure I can get the star status." Clean smiled with satisfaction and said, "That's great, let's go." Turning around, Clean walked up the stairs, and Li Ming followed him without saying a word. From the stairs to the top, it was the surface of the tree trunk, which was as open as a square. Many people were walking back and forth on it, and there were also many aircraft parked. Clean took Li Ming alone to a certain aircraft, and entered the interior through the open hatch. The aircraft was 7 or 8 meters long and 5 or 6 meters wide. It was a small or medium-sized spacecraft. It was completely black and made of unknown metal. After Li Ming entered, the hatch closed. There were already 3 people sitting quietly in the spacecraft, and they were talking from time to time. In addition to Li Ming and Clean, the other 3 people in the spacecraft were Xenia, Thor, and an alien that Li Ming had never seen before. Judging from his clothes and appearance, this person also belongs to the Death Medicine clan, a 6th order civilization, and is at the same instructor level as Clean. Clean walked through the cabin and went directly into the cockpit. After some operations on the console, he said, "We are leaving now. You all find seats and sit down." There were many empty seats in the empty cabin. Li Ming found a corner and sat down slowly, while Xenia and Thor sat together in front of him, chatting from time to time. As for the unfamiliar 6th order instructor, he closed his eyes, said nothing, and looked aloof. Chapter 118, the former site of the Phasey people. 4 spaceships flew across the sky, like 4 rockets, at a very fast speed. Li Ming approached the window of the aircraft and looked out. There was an oasis with no end in sight. After a while, the speed of the aircraft slowed down, and the oasis disappeared completely. A mountain range appeared in the field of vision. These mountains were bare, all made of rocks of different sizes, and were very desolate. However, as long as you look closely, you can find that the original appearance of the stone mountain is not a stone mountain, but a construction area. However, these buildings are all made of huge stones. This ancient way of living seems to be incomparable to the high-rise buildings on Earth. The aircraft slowly flew over this construction area and came to a flat ground. Below is a smooth and flat area. Occasionally, weeds can be seen. The ground seems to be made of sand, stone, and cement. Li Ming retracted his gaze. At this time, the aircraft slowly descended and landed in the center of this area. Clean left the control panel of the aircraft, turned around and said, "We are here." The hatch opened, and Clean walked out first. As soon as he arrived on the ground, Clean coughed twice and looked around with his eyes. After the other spaceships came to a stop, people of other races got off. Li Ming stood not far behind Clean. His eyes moved slightly and finally stopped on Xenia. There were 4 mountains in the 4 directions. These mountains were not like the previous mountains. They were separate stone mountains. They were full of broken walls and ruins of buildings. These buildings were similar to the ones seen before, all made of stone. Xenia looked at the surrounding environment and showed a sad look. She seemed to remember something in the past. She moved slowly, with an expression that was almost dazed. Her eyes were full of confusion, but also mixed with a trace of hatred. "What's wrong, Xenia?" Li Ming came to Xenia and asked in a low voice. Xenia stared blankly at a certain hilltop and whispered, "That's my tribe, my home." But now, the sad past made Xenia unable to extricate herself. The good past could never be returned. Li Ming gently patted her shoulder with his hand and said, "Don't be sad. Everything will be fine." Xenia suddenly turned her head and looked at Li Ming's happy smile. Suddenly, her expression became firm. After nodding vigorously, she replied, "Yes. Everyone is here. Let's go." Clean said loudly to everyone, and at the same time, took the lead to run to a certain mountain. The others could only follow behind him without saying a word. Walking along the smooth ground towards the mountain, Clean walked in front, as if he was familiar with the road, with light and fast steps, heading straight to a place in memory. Approaching the mountain, walking behind Clean, Li Ming was thinking about something, while checking the surrounding environment. From the bottom of the mountain to the top, there are neat steps. This step is located in the middle of the mountain, more than 10 meters wide, leading directly to the top of the mountain. On both sides of the steps are destroyed buildings, but these buildings are not complete residential buildings, but doorways and decorations. Li Ming squinted his eyes, looked carefully at these stone buildings, and found something unusual. The stones used in the construction contain a certain amount of energy, similar to doorways. The layers of the mountain are similar to pyramids, and each layer is dozens of meters high. The so-called buildings are just decorations at the entrance of the cave. Each building corresponds to a cave. The inside of the cave is the real residential area. From the outside, the doorway decoration has been severely damaged, and it is a mess. Even the steps under your feet are full of various discarded items. However, after a long time, some weeds have grown out of the gaps in the bricks and stones. These devastated scenes are the masterpieces of the Star Raiders back then. But in Xenia's view, the sad scene seems to be vivid, making her heart unable to calm down for a long time. Walking along the steps to the top of the mountain, when approaching the top of the mountain, a cave entrance of more than 3 meters wide and more than 2 meters high has appeared. This cave entrance is located in the middle of the wide steps. There are still steps on both sides of the cave entrance. Clean did not bypass the cave entrance, but went directly into it. The 4 walls of the cave are all dark stones, and the faint light emitted provides a good view. The corridor-like passage extends all the way to the inside of the cave, and it can be seen from a distance that the light in the distance of the cave is unusually bright. When everyone reached the end, they stopped. The light in the middle of the cave came from the top. Looking up, this place actually led directly to the top of the mountain. The light was the sunlight of Li Ming. The position covered by the light was a round platform, and the 3 positions of the round platform were 3 stone beasts. The 3 stone beasts had strange shapes, opened their mouths like lions, and 3 pairs of bright eyes were vividly staring at the position in the middle of the round platform. This is the teleportation platform, Clean said with a little excitement, and at the same time, turned his eyes to look at Xenia. Little princess, let's start, Clean said with a smile. Xenia ignored him. Her bright eyes kept blinking as she looked around, as if she was recalling something. As for what Clean had just said, she seemed to have not heard it. Clean looked dissatisfied. Just as he was about to say something, Thor beside him quickly put his hands on Xenia's shoulders and said softly, Xenia, let's get started. Xenia glanced at Thor, snorted unhappily, and walked directly to the round platform, saying, bring your wild beasts up. As she spoke, Xenia had already climbed the steps and entered the round platform. All the others did not dare to stop at all. They summoned their own phantom beasts and then entered the round platform. After all the people and the wild beasts gathered, Xenia turned around and looked at a stone beast. Then she slowly closed her eyes, looking as if she was thinking about something else. She kept muttering something in her mouth, as if it was a spell. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly and heard the voice from Xenia's mouth, but he could not understand the content and could not comprehend it for a while. He just looked at her quietly. After a while, the 3 stone beasts suddenly shook, as if there was an earthquake. Dust fell from the stone beasts, but except for the stone beasts, other places were motionless. The next moment, the eyes of the 3 stone beasts emitted red light together. 3 pairs of eyes and 6 red lights gathered on Xenia's body. These red lights looked up and down at Xenia like a scanner, as if confirming something. Xenia still had her eyes closed, and the surface of her body seemed to be emitting red light. The red light faded after a while, and the eyes of the stone beasts returned to normal, but then the mouths of the 3 stone beasts suddenly emitted golden light. The golden light shot out from both sides of the mouth. The golden light of the 3 stone beasts' mouths connected to each other to form a triangle. Everyone was surrounded by the golden light of the triangle in the center. After the golden light was connected, a vertical golden light curtain was formed, and all the people disappeared in the golden light curtain. Chapter 119, Secluded Path. The golden light flashed, like the sun, but it was only a flash. When the golden light flashed, 10 figures appeared on a round platform. The round platform and the stone beasts had not changed at all. They were exactly the same as before in the cave. The difference was that the surrounding environment was already another world. There were towering trees on all sides, and the sky and white clouds above were blue. This was not inside a cave, but more like a paradise. There was only a dirt road leading to the depths. Under the cover of the dense forest and trees, the end of the road could not be seen at a glance. Where is this? Clean was a little confused and looked at Xenia. Xenia ignored her, moved her body, walked down the round platform, and walked to the depths of the dirt road. Sol on the side smiled and said, this road is the road to the secret realm. I have only been here once before, and I have never gone deep into it. Clean nodded slightly without saying a word. At the same time, he turned his eyes and looked at Li Ming, suggesting that Li Ming follow Xenia. Just as Li Ming was about to leave, Xenia, who had already walked down the steps, suddenly turned around, glanced at everyone, and said, the secluded path is ahead. release all the wild beasts, and try to restrain your own breath. It is best to let the wild beast's breath cover your own breath, because there are high level wild beasts in the woods on both sides of the secluded path. The lowest is level 5. If you don't want to die, follow me closely, and do as I say. Li Ming stopped where he was, and looked at Clean slightly. Clean didn't say anything, nodded slightly, and said, "Let's go, do as Xenia said." As soon as the voice fell, everyone placed the wild beasts on their bodies, some on their necks, some on their heads, and some on their backs. In short, they tried to let the wild beasts occupy important positions on their bodies as much as possible, because only in this way can the wild beast's breath cover their own body breath as much as possible. Seeing this, Xenia snorted and walked quickly along the dirt road alone. The appearance of this scene made Clean frown slightly, and he showed a puzzled look, thinking, what's going on? This girl neither let Li Ming follow her, nor stayed beside Thor. Did she notice something? Or following her without knowing why? I'm afraid. Clean followed behind Xenia, thinking about something repeatedly in his mind. Li Ming followed behind Clean, although he didn't say a word, but Xenia's little head's thoughts had been noticed by Li Ming. Xenia did have her own ideas for this trip, and her purpose even surprised Li Ming. Seeing through the bad things in it, Li Ming didn't say it, but just followed closely. As for the taboos on the road, it was just as Xenia said, and he needed to try his best to let the wild beast's breath cover his own breath. Li Ming turned his eyes slightly to the side, glanced at Mo beside him, and said consciously, "Next, it's up to you." Mo closed his eyes, as if he was resting, and said nothing. However, like Li Ming, Mo noticed Xenia's inner thoughts. Not only that, Mo also sensed Clean and Thor's inner thoughts. Clean, Thor, these two guys actually want to kill Li Ming? Well, they took action, and it just happened to help me get rid of Li Ming. Mo thought in his heart, and continued to think about something. Relying on these two guys may not be reliable. If there is a better opportunity to get rid of Li Ming, it would be great. Let's go first. No one could detect Mo's thoughts. This was entirely due to the 6 domains of Mangsing Hukang that he had practiced. Even Li Ming could not match his powerful mental power. A group of 10 people and 9 beasts walked slowly on the smooth and hard dirt road. No one knew when they would reach the second section of the passage. It was right to follow Xenia closely. At this time, the 2 beast tamers walking at the back were already whispering something. Fitch's eyes moved slightly, and after glancing at Ellis, he said, "When will we start?" Ellis's face remained unchanged, and he looked calm. While looking at the team in front, he whispered, "No hurry, this first section of the passage may not be that simple. Wait for my signal after confirming that it is safe." "Yes." Fitch agreed softly. These 2 people are both 6th level civilizations. If Li Ming just thought about the above conversation, he would not dare to rashly explore it, but such a low whisper was still sensed by Li Ming. This is also the strength of spiritual civilization. "Start? What do these 2 people want to do?" Li Ming said secretly. His expression did not change at all, as if nothing had happened. It's just that the specific situation of these 2 people's hearts is unknown, but since they mentioned starting, it must not be a good thing. Li Ming still has to be vigilant against these 2 people. Although Li Ming can't explore deeper content, Mo can easily explore it. The 6th level civilization is still a low level civilization in front of Mo. A pair of eyes moved slightly, and the little head turned, looking back at Fitch and the black crow ape above his head. As soon as he saw the ape, Mo gnashed his teeth, and wanted to tear it into pieces immediately. Li Ming noticed Mo's actions, smiled lightly, and said, "What's wrong, Mo?" Mo snorted and replied, "That monkey hit me that day." "Oh." Li Ming looked back, and saw Fitch and the black crow ape on his head. Although he didn't say anything, he secretly said in his heart, "MD, Mo, who bullied me, don't let me catch you, I will peel off your monkey skin." After everyone continued to move forward for a while, the road in front of them was still endless, and there was no end in sight, as if this road would never end. Moreover, since entering this place, everyone has been walking for half a day. Clean looked at Xenia in front of him, feeling a little angry, and gnashing his teeth. "Stop!" Clean suddenly shouted, and everyone immediately stopped. Xenia, who was walking in the front, also stopped in surprise, and turned her head to look at Clean with a cold disdain. Clean gritted his teeth, his eyes blazing with anger, and he uttered a few words from between his teeth. "Little girl, what do you mean?" Xenia looked puzzled and asked, "What's wrong?" Clean angrily came to a tree on the side of the road, pointed at the big tree, and shouted, "I have seen this tree 3 times. What's going on?" Li Ming said nothing, but what Clean said was true. This secluded path was like a reincarnation path, going back and forth, as if everyone was going in circles, but Li Ming did not dare to ask more, so he could only follow. Xenia looked disdainful, snorted, and said, "What's so strange about this? The secluded path is originally 3 layers and 4 turns. You Florentines naturally don't know. You have passed the 3rd layer, and you will arrive after 4 turns." Clean still looked puzzled, half believing and half doubting Xenia's words, and turned his eyes to look at Thor. Thor shook his head slightly, not knowing about this. Clean sighed deeply, and said nothing more. After looking at Xenia, he said, "It's better not to play tricks, otherwise." Xenia glanced at the other party, and continued to walk forward. Ah! A strange roar was heard. The sound was like thunder, making the ears buzz, as if some giant beast was roaring a warning, and the sound alone was frightening. Everyone turned their heads and looked around, showing worry. Those wild beasts that were originally tamed were also panicking and agitated at this moment, and each of them leaned close to their masters, showing a look of fear. More also got close to Li Ming's head and looked around carefully. Clean, who was originally pointing at a big tree, suddenly shrank back, looked into the depths of the woods, and his face became a little ugly. Xenia, who had just taken a few steps, paused for a moment, and then continued to walk deeper into the cave, saying, "I warned you, you'd better do as I say and follow me closely, otherwise something unexpected might happen, and you may lose your life." After saying this, Clean immediately returned to the team, gave Xenia a fierce look, and then followed closely. Chapter 120, Violent Black Crow Beast. 3 layers and 4 tracks, 3 repetitive paths, 4 winding detours. Half a day later, a mountain appeared in front of us. The mountain was wide and tall, with the top soaring into the clouds. Everyone's face relaxed a lot after seeing the mountain. "It looks like we'll be at the 2nd section of the passage soon." Fitch at the back whispered, and glanced at Ellis beside him. Ellis snorted, looked around, and said, "The 2nd section of the passage has many forks in the road. You find a chance to do it. I need to be the first to enter the ranking, so that I can have the greatest chance of getting the star status." "Understood." Fitch's mouth showed a sinister look, and he replied proudly. Li Ming rolled his eyes slightly, and glanced behind him, thinking to himself, "So they are competing for the 1st place. Just give it to him. It's not worth risking your life for it." Just as Li Ming was thinking this, Clean in front of him suddenly turned around, glanced at Li Ming, and said, "Li Ming, go to the front, and follow Xenia closely. After all, you are ranked 1st, and you will have to choose the route first." "Yes." Li Ming was a little surprised, but still walked a few steps quickly to Xenia's side. Xenia glanced at Li Ming, then looked back at Clean, and continued walking without saying a word. Looking at Li Ming and Xenia in front of him, Clean opened his mouth slightly and whispered, "I'll let you keep a close eye on Li Ming and get rid of him before the 3rd passage. Thor, you keep a close eye on Xenia and kill her after you get the star certificate. Without Xenia, you will be the legitimate chief of the Fixie tribe after you get the star certificate." "Yes." Alid on the left and Thor on the right whispered in unison. Clean nodded with satisfaction, and continued to whisper, "The 3rd passage is guarded by the giant beast Isaac. Our 4 tribes still need to work together to deal with it. After we get the star certificate, the 3 of us will work together to kill everyone." These whispers entered Li Ming's ears clearly. More on his shoulder also sensed it very clearly. He closed his eyes slightly, and said to himself, "It seems that I'm really going to be free this time. This guy Li Ming is definitely going to die. But these people are still not very reliable after all." Li Ming lowered his head slightly, and looked at Xenia as he walked. Obviously, Xenia knew nothing about it at the moment. Continuing forward, the mountain was within reach, and a huge cave appeared in front of them. The cave was more than 10 meters high and 7 or 8 meters wide. It was pitch black inside. Nothing could be seen except darkness. Xenia paused and stopped first. As Xenia paused, everyone else stopped. Why aren't you leaving? Clean suddenly asked. Xenia seemed not to have heard him. She said nothing, just raised her head and looked at the huge cave in front of her. This is the entrance to the second section of the passage. There will be more than a dozen forks inside. After entering, you can only choose one in order. Xenia whispered, as if she was talking to herself or to the people behind her. Although her voice was not loud, everyone could hear it clearly. Everyone started to discuss it. Some people looked directly at Li Ming, while others whispered something. At this moment, a scream of "Gab" was heard, and the sound was as miserable as a chicken being strangled by the neck. Hearing the sound, everyone turned around and looked, only to see a black crow ape in the sky holding a wild beast that looked like a duck in one hand, with its teeth bared. Fitch. What do you mean? Jeremy, the 6th level mentor of the alien race, widened his eyes, looked at Fitch angrily, and shouted. Fitch pretended to be worried, looked at the black crow ape in the sky, and roared, "Beast. Do you want to die? Put down Jeremy's wild beast." This shout made everyone confused, as if Fitch's wild beast suddenly became violent and out of control. Jeremy's eyes narrowed, and he said sternly, "Fitch, don't pretend here. Among us, if someone else said this, it might be somewhat credible. You are a mentor of the beast taming tribe. How could this happen?" After this, Li Ming couldn't help but think, yes, the beast taming tribe is good at taming beasts. How could this happen? Fitch didn't care about it at all, but chuckled and said, "So what if you are a beast tamer? The wild beasts are violent, and I can't control them. You." Jeremy was extremely angry but helpless. At this time, the black crow ape in the air suddenly let out a strange howl, and the other hand was already on the duck beast's head, and then it turned hard, like turning a valve. With a slight squeak, the duck beast opened its mouth and died. Fitch. Jeremy gritted his teeth, watching his wild beast die, and wanted to kill Fitch immediately, but it seemed to have some taboos. Clean looked at all this, his eyes looked around, narrowed slightly, and whispered, "The beast tamers are starting now." Fitch glanced at Ellis beside him, his face turned pale, and said, "Let's get started." As he said this, Fitch suddenly jumped into the air, raised his right hand, and a red light flashed in his palm, and a grey whip appeared. Snap. The whip made a deafening sound, and after the sound, the black crow ape raised its head to the sky and let out a long howl. Suddenly, a red light shone brightly on its body. Along with this red light, the small black crow ape grew larger. Almost in the blink of an eye, the black crow ape, which was only about 1 meter tall, suddenly grew 4 or 5 meters tall, and became a giant ape. As soon as the giant ape was formed, it leaned over, and rushed towards the crowd. Its 2 big hands turned into 2 fists, and smashed into the crowd. This is the unique ability of the beast tamers, beast taming enhancement. The other 3 tribes are naturally familiar with this. Facing the heavy punch attack, the crowd dispersed and dodged around. Fitch and Ellis jumped high into the sky, and when they landed, they were already at the entrance of the cave. Ellis did not stop at all, and turned around, and ran straight into the cave. He turned around, and disappeared into the dark cave. At this time, the giant ape kept waving his hands, grabbing and smashing people wildly when he saw them. He was already very beastly and irritable. Clean turned his head, and looked at the entrance of the cave. He narrowed his eyes and said viciously, "Don't worry about this beast, go into the cave quickly." As soon as the voice fell, Elite and Thor ran to the entrance of the cave, and Clean followed closely. The ranking seemed insignificant at this time, and there was no restraint at all. Everyone ran desperately into the cave. The giant ape continued to roar, and his irritable hands kept slapping the ground, but the 6th level civilization mentor was extraordinary, and he had no intention of fighting with this beast at the moment, and wanted to enter the cave as much as possible. The giant ape also attacked nearby, and those who hid far away were not pursued. His eyes glowed red, and he turned, and looked directly at the weakest Xenia, and a big hand smashed over like a boulder. Xenia's face turned pale and her whole body trembled slightly, but she was so frightened that her body was extremely stiff, and she couldn't move at all. At this critical moment, Li Ming suddenly flashed and hugged Xenia to avoid the attack. A muffled sound of bang was heard, and the giant ape's palm attack missed, and hit the ground. The sound was deafening, and the earth trembled. At the same time, dust and smoke also floated, covering the entire area. When the dust and smoke fell, Li Ming half crouched in the distance, holding Xenia in his left hand and holding something in his right hand. It was the Stardust weapon, Hulang. The giant ape howled again, and his red eyes swept around. There was no one in the nearby area, except for Li Ming and Xenia. Everyone else had already entered the cave. Li Ming, you idiot, why don't you run? I don't want to die. More angrily, and the clucking sound of a chicken resounded in Li Ming's ears. Li Ming, however, had a calm expression, gently put Xenia aside, slowly stood up, smiled slightly, and glanced at Moore beside him, and said, Moore, the guy who bullied you is it, right? Moore's face suddenly changed when he heard this, and his eyes blinked several times. He repeatedly looked at Li Ming and said hesitantly, yes, you wouldn't. Li Ming's right hand flashed with white light, activated Hulang, and said viciously, I just want to vent your anger for you. I want to let it know that the guy who bullies my partner Li Ming is absolutely unforgivable. Chapter 121 My taste, your temper. Moore's eyes were a little moist. Hearing Li Ming's bold words to vent his anger, he was so moved that he almost shed tears. Li Ming's body was already covered with hard armor. He held the long sword Hulang in his right hand and stared at the giant ape in front of him. The giant ape's eyes quickly locked on Li Ming. Li Ming was also ready to fight. He glanced at Xenia behind him and said, Xenia, you stay away first. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Ming went straight to the giant ape. This guy, is he serious? Moore looked at Li Ming's serious expression in surprise and said to himself again in his heart, he didn't run away in order to avenge me. He is really a fool with a similar temper to me. Okay, revenge is the character of Yo. Go ahead, Li Ming. Moore chuckled and shouted loudly. Li Ming looked at the excited Moore, smiled and said, let's collect some data and analyze my winning rate. Okay, according to my brain's calculation, you have a winning rate of up to 49%. Moore shouted excitedly. Li Ming's face was dark, and he asked, what about the remaining 51%? You will be beaten into a meat pie by it. Moore continued to shout loudly, but then he said, but with my assistance, your winning rate will increase to 149%. Haha. While shouting, Moore also laughed excitedly, as if he was happy to get something. Li Ming's mouth corners slightly raised, not caring at all. The violent giant ape had lost control and attacked anyone within sight. At this time, Li Ming rushed towards him. The giant ape roared and smashed his fists. Li Ming realized the opponent's intention, paused, braked his feet, and tried to jump to the side at the same time. Boom. With a deafening roar, the giant ape, with both hands clasped together, smashed a deep pit on the ground with all its strength, and dust and smoke rose up, and the ground trembled slightly. After Li Ming dodged, his figure did not pause for long, and he rushed towards the giant ape again with his feet. With his agile body, Li Ming continued to approach the giant ape. Although the giant ape had strong attack power, its reaction speed was obviously a bit slower. In addition, Li Ming's ability to predict danger made the giant ape's attack seem a little pale. Bang, bang, bang after a series of sounds, the giant ape's fists kept falling on the ground, like a giant iron hammer smashing. Once hit, it would be absolutely fatal. Although the power was strong, it could not hit Li Ming at once. This also made the giant ape more irritable. Without waiting for the giant ape to attack again, Li Ming swung his long sword, and his figure shook. A light snap sound was heard, and blood splashed out. The giant ape's leg was cut open by Li Ming. Ah! In the severe pain, the giant ape staggered and roared. Even though the sharp grey talon could not exert its unique ability, this kind of attack was not something the wild beast could resist. The giant ape bent its body and leaned over to grab its own leg, but at this time Li Ming's figure had disappeared. He turned around and stabbed with another sword, and the other leg was also bleeding. The two legs were cut by the long sword, leaving deep and long bloody wounds. Although it could not be cut off directly, the pain made the giant ape stand a little unstable and unable to move at all. The giant ape howled angrily, and a pair of black feather wings behind it opened. After a flap, the dust on the ground was blown away, and then the huge body actually took off. Li Ming frowned and looked up. The giant ape had already flown to a height of more than 10 meters, and lowered its head to look at Li Ming. The giant ape gritted his teeth, and looked at Li Ming with angry eyes. The wounds on his legs continued to bleed, and the blood dripped down along the hair on his legs. Looking at Li Ming on the ground, the giant ape was already afraid. It turned its eyes and suddenly looked at Xenia in the distance. When the giant ape looked at it, Xenia couldn't help but shrink and cried out softly, seeming to be extremely worried. Li Ming also sensed the giant ape's thoughts at this time and whispered, "Not good." As soon as he finished speaking, the giant ape flapped its wings, turned its body, and rushed towards Xenia. Li Ming used his legs to gather enough energy and ran quickly towards Xenia. After running a few steps, Li Ming frowned and said to himself in his heart, "No, it's too late." The giant ape was obviously falling from the air faster than Li Ming. Li Ming only took a glance and realized that his speed was not enough to stop the giant ape. Moore frowned and looked at the giant ape with anger. His whole body was glowing red. The huge phantom appeared again, like a huge flame, in the form of an illusion. A huge red palm stretched out from the flame and wrapped the giant ape's head in it. "Ah!" The giant ape screamed, and its two big hands quickly hugged its head, as if it was in great pain. Its falling body stopped in the air. Li Ming glanced at Xenia in the distance, and then immediately turned his eyes back to the giant ape. Obviously, it would be better to kill the giant ape than to save Xenia at this time. He jumped into the air at the right time and slashed down with the grey dragon in his hand. A flash of white light, blood flew across, and a deep bloody wound appeared on the neck of the giant ape. The blood spurted out, accompanied by the purple light. The purple light came from Li Ming's sword. After this blow, the giant ape had no strength to fight. Its body struggled in the air for a few times and fell to the ground like a pool of mud. Li Ming stood beside the giant ape, looking at its body that was still twitching slightly. He turned his right hand and collected the grey dragon. The armor on his body also disappeared. With the induction of consciousness, Li Ming had seen that the giant ape in front of him was about to die. Moore's expression recovered a little, and the phantom red light also disappeared directly. "It's too easy for it to die just like that," Moore said indignantly. Li Ming nodded slightly and said, "Yes, I wanted to torture it. This is good, so that no more trouble will happen." As he spoke, Li Ming looked up at Xenia and smiled slightly. Xenia's panic expression had recovered, and she turned her eyes to Li Ming with gratitude. Coming to Xenia's side, Li Ming leaned over and squatted, smiling, and said, "It's safe now, let's go." Li Ming stood up and prepared to walk towards the cave, but before he turned around, he stopped where he was. Xenia stood there blankly, staring at Li Ming with her big watery eyes. "Brother Li Ming, are you really going to join the Florentines?" Xenia looked at Li Ming seriously and earnestly, as if this question was extremely important. Li Ming stood there with a look of hesitation. After a little thought, he snorted and said, "Of course not. I, a foreigner, will be rejected on Philistar. But if I don't obey them for the time being, I'm afraid I can't stand here and talk to you now." Xenia smiled lightly, as if she got the answer she wanted. She pouted happily and said, "Okay, let's go." After getting the answer she wanted, Xenia walked into the cave, as if she had suddenly heard some happy news. Li Ming looked at the little guy who suddenly became happy, but his face was gloomy, but he still followed him closely. Chapter 122, Killing Intent Fluctuation. The cave, which looked pitch black from the outside, became brighter after entering. The cave was empty and there was no one in sight. It was dozens of meters long and wide, with a huge area. However, there were more than a dozen intersections on the deep cave wall. These intersections were all separate cave entrances, each 2 meters long and wide, leading straight to the depths, with no end in sight. There was also a bit of fear in the darkness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Xenia counted the cave entrances, her eyes fixed on a certain cave entrance, and smiled slightly. "Let's go, it's here." As she spoke, Xenia had already walked into the cave entrance, and Li Ming followed closely behind. Everything in Xenia's little head was under the control of Li Ming's consciousness. "Li Ming, once you get the star status, Clean and others will kill you to silence you, and Xenia," Moore said with consciousness after a struggle. Li Ming's steps forward suddenly paused, his eyebrows twitched, and his eyes suddenly turned to Moore. "How did you know?" "Humph, of course it's my ability of Hukan." Li Ming nodded gently, and he understood that Mer's ability of Hukan was indeed powerful, and it was better than Li Ming's wisdom eyes. In addition to being amazed, Li Ming also developed a strong interest in Hukan. In fact, when Li Ming obtained the wisdom eyes, he had already taken a fancy to the star class of the 6 domains Mangsing. The powerful wisdom eye ability allowed Li Ming to see many of the things he wanted. The 6 domains Mangsing is composed of 6 fragments, each of which has a unique ability, all of which belong to spiritual civilization. As long as there are clues, Li Ming still wants to get this kind of star class as much as possible. Mer has the ability of Hukang, one of the star classes. Li Ming has no way of knowing whether the other party has a star class, but the blood contract has been connected. When the time is right, Li Ming will find a chance to ask about this matter. But for now, this matter can only be put on hold temporarily. After all, the star class in the secret realm of the falling rice gate has not been obtained yet. Thinking this in his heart, without much expression on his face, Li Ming's eyes suddenly looked at Xenia in front of him, and he thought to himself, Xenia already knows about the dealings of Saul and Florence. She must have overheard something. Telling her too much may cause trouble. Let's just let the situation develop and respond accordingly. After muttering to himself, Li Ming didn't think much about it, and just followed the other party quietly. Going deeper into the dark cave, the situation inside became more complicated. Although the cave entrance was only 2 meters long and wide, as he went deeper, many cave spaces appeared in the cave. These spaces were of different sizes, some were tens of meters wide, and some were more than 10 meters wide. If it weren't for Xenia leading the way, the existence of these spaces would even make Li Ming think that he had reached the end of the cave. This confusing cave is indeed easy to get lost. If the passage had been continuously extended with a width of about 2 meters, it would be better, but the huge space that appeared from time to time in the middle constantly affected the entrance. Although these spaces were connected to the passage, there was no trace of artificial excavation, which was completely different from those passages. It seemed that they were accidentally connected to this place when digging the passage. Whoosh, a gust of wind blew, and Li Ming and others just entered a certain space. The wind sounded tight and loose, like breathing. Not good. Xenia suddenly stopped and shouted. Li Ming didn't understand, and stared at Xenia. Isaac is awake. Xenia screamed again, and ran to the depths. This strange behavior made Li Ming confused, and he immediately quickened his pace, and followed Xenia closely. After a quick run, dots of light appeared, and a faint light could be seen in the distance, as if the exit had arrived. Ah! A deafening roar came. Li Ming frowned, and blocked his body with his arms. His ears were buzzing, and at the same time a gust of wind whistled, and the whole cave trembled slightly, and some gravel continued to slide from the cave wall. It felt like the cave was about to collapse. After the gust of wind, Li Ming put his arm down, and Xenia in front of him was already standing at the entrance of the cave in the distance, casting a long shadow under the faint light. Li Ming walked a few steps quickly to the cave entrance. The scene in front of him made Li Ming's eyebrows tighten, and his mouth opened a little. The area in front of him was a space of hundreds of meters long and wide. The edge of the space was a steep cliff, rising from the ground, and reaching the sky. Looking up, you can see the blue sky. This place is a bit like a natural deep well. Opposite the cave, in trance where Li Ming was a cave entrance of 5 or 6 meters long and wide. The grey fluorescence inside seemed extremely strange, but there was actually a huge beast standing at the entrance of the cave. It looked like an orangutan, and its body surface was not hair, but scales similar to fish scales. It was shining, and seemed very hard. The beast was more than 10 meters tall and huge, like a diamond beast, but there were 3 red chains on its back. The chain was like a phantom, connecting the depths of the grey cave entrance. It was precisely because of the restraint of these 3 chains that the beast's activity area could only be within a few dozen meters of the cave entrance. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and his face turned pale. This beast actually had a 7th level strength. The mentors of the 4 aces stood in the outermost area. They looked at the giant beast in front of them, and did not dare to step forward. They just talked to each other. After Xenia looked at those people, her eyes stopped on the giant beast, and she whispered, Isaac. The cave behind Isaac is the secret realm she guards. Follow me. Xenia said as she quietly walked towards the cave. Li Ming continued to follow her without saying a word. In the crowd, Clean glanced at Fitch not far away and said coldly, "The secret realm is right in front of us. Isn't it time for you beast tamers to take action?" Fitch smiled lightly and replied, "This is a 7th level wild beast. We may be able to hold it off for a while, if we join forces. As for the secret realm, we can only let the wild beast find a chance to enter." Clean glanced at the other party, and then turned his eyes to the others. The 3 people from the Light Medicine clan and the alien race did not say a word, as if they were waiting for something. Just as Clean was about to say something, Thor suddenly exclaimed, "That's Li Ming and Xenia." In the distance, Li Ming was walking towards the grey cave entrance of the secret realm under the guidance of Xenia, and the giant beast Isaac just stared at the two of them, without any intention of stopping them. Clean was excited, and was about to do something, when he suddenly paused, his expression relaxed, and he smiled faintly. "Is it Li Ming? We can't let him succeed." Fitch suddenly noticed this, raised his arm, and the long whip reappeared. At the same time, his figure flashed, leaped into the air, and actually went straight to Li Ming. Clean noticed Fitch's move, and immediately jumped up, and a black light flashed in his right hand, and a green willow branch appeared in his hand. Clean's eyes flashed with murderous intent, and his eyebrows were full of murderous intent. He swung the willow branch, accompanied by the black light, and whipped Fitch. Fitch was shocked, and quickly waved the whip in his hand to block it. Bang! A violent collision sound was heard, and grey and black light burst out, which was the result of a powerful energy collision. The willow branch and whip were also 4th level Stardust weapons. After a contact, Fitch could not continue to approach Li Ming, and could only fall back to the ground, while Clean fell back to his original position. "Clean, are you going to kill me?" Fitch narrowed his eyes, and said fiercely word by word. Clean's cold face was expressionless, and he said, "Fitch, Li Ming is a member of our Death Medicine clan. What you did just now, isn't it also a murderous intention? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 123, Weird Cave Wall. Li Ming and Xenia paused after hearing the sound, and turned their heads to look at the crowd in the distance. Although those 6th level mentors showed some eagerness, they did not seem to come closer for some reason. Xenia looked back at Li Ming and said, "Brother Li Ming, follow me closely." Li Ming smiled slightly, nodded gently, and said nothing. Seeing Li Ming slowly approaching the grey cave in trance, Clean showed satisfaction and whispered, "It seems that High Priest Lamon's point of view is correct." Having said this, Clean glanced at Thor and Elite beside him, and continued to whisper, "Wait until Li Ming and Xenia enter, then take action. Kill the people of the other 3 tribes, and then wait for Li Ming and the others to come out. So, there is no need to join forces to deal with Isaac." "Yes." Thor and Elite nodded in agreement. Fitch looked at the figures of Li Ming and Xenia, and immediately understood something. After looking at the people of the Light Medicine and Alien clan, he smiled coldly and said, "After Li Ming and Xenia enter the secret realm, they will definitely come out. Among those of us outside, whoever controls Li Ming will also get the Star clan, not just the Death Medicine clan." The voice was not loud, but everyone heard it very clearly. Jeremy of the alien race glanced at his partner beside him, and then turned his gaze to other people. Obviously, Fitch's words made the atmosphere on the field become subtle. Li Ming didn't care about the changes in the crowd. After walking a distance, he had entered the area controlled by Isaac. Li Ming slowed down his pace. Just a glance at the giant beast, Li Ming was shocked by its 7th level strength. It felt like a human with bare hands trying to walk in front of a lion. As long as the other party launched an attack, there was absolutely no possibility of escape. Under this kind of pressure, no one can help but get nervous. Li Ming became extremely cautious, and his heartbeat beat with the breathing of the giant beast. It is no exaggeration to say that, even if the giant beast took a deep breath, Li Ming would tremble. Not only Li Ming, but also Mer on his shoulder was trembling, and his body kept curling up next to Li Ming's head. Li Ming's eyes were tense and looked at the giant beast from time to time and at Xenia at the same time. Maybe he was too nervous. Xenia, who was walking in front, seemed to notice Li Ming's fear. After turning her head slightly, she whispered, "Brother Li Ming, follow me closely, don't be afraid." This warm sentence made Li Ming smile slightly, and his nervous mood immediately subsided a lot. Even Mer on his shoulder relaxed. He didn't look at the giant beast anymore, but just stared at Xenia's slow pace, and the fear was slowly fading away. The giant beast Isaac's eyes just glanced at Xenia, but didn't care, and looked back at the 6th level mentor. Although Xenia did nothing, Li Ming still noticed something through his wisdom eyes. Xenia's body exuded a strange aura. This aura could not be seen or smelled, but could be sensed by consciousness. It was like a hazy mist that enveloped Li Ming and herself. This aura seemed to make them disappear like a barrier. From Isaac's perspective, it was a familiar smell, without hostility or malice, although the people inside were very strange. Without the obstruction of the giant beast Isaac, Li Ming and Xenia slowly walked to the grey cave entrance. Only when they got closer did Li Ming see clearly that this grey thing was actually some kind of barrier. Xenia gently raised her hand, slid on the grey barrier, and then walked directly in. After passing through the grey barrier, they came to the inside of a cave with red light. At this time, the cave was like a palace, magnificent and golden. The cave was more than 10 meters long and wide, not large in area, and gorgeously decorated. On the left and right were flat walls. The two walls were white, like smooth tiles, one by one, each 1 foot long and wide. What is striking is that each of these white slabs is engraved with a red character, the size of a palm, in the middle of the slab. Each character is bright red and complex, with a red halo. These characters are what Li Ming has never seen before, just like traditional Chinese characters, with many strokes. The walls on both sides are like this, and there is a high platform in the middle facing the cave entrance. 3 or 4 meters high, like an altar. A round stone ball is placed on the top of the platform. The surface of the ball is grey, but the inside emits red light, and 3 red chains are pulled out of the ball. After the chain is pulled out of the ball, it extends all the way to the back of the giant beast outside the cave. The whole chain is red, like a phantom, which is the chain that binds the giant beast Isaac. And right below the ball are 2 star books, and Li Ming's eyes soon stop on the star books. Xenia first came to the front of the platform, bowed her head and saluted, and then walked up the steps of the platform. Arriving at the sphere on the top of the platform, Xenia stood there in a daze. Her eyes turned. She first put away the 2 star books, and then stared at the sphere in a daze. Seeing Xenia put away the 2 star books, Li Ming frowned slightly. There was no doubt that the 2 star books should be the more precious alchemy star books and synthesis star books of the Phase people. These 2 star books were crucial for Li Ming's future advancement. Li Ming stared at Xenia, not knowing what she was going to do, but he was already thinking about something in his mind. It's naturally easy to take the 2 star books from Xenia, but once I take them now, it's not reasonable for this little girl. Thinking of this, Li Ming turned around and looked outside the cave. Besides, there is the giant beast Isaac. Without Xenia, I'm afraid I can't think of getting out alive. Thinking of this, the impulsive idea immediately disappeared in his mind. Xenia watched the stone ball for a while, then walked down from the platform and came to the side of the platform. Her little hand stroked and turned the stone wall of the platform. A dull sound of squeak was heard, and a door opened on the stone wall. Xenia did not go in immediately, but turned to look at Li Ming and said, "Brother Li Ming, I have something important to deal with alone. Don't come in. It may take a long time." Okay. Li Ming agreed casually without saying anything more. Xenia showed a serious expression on her face, and then entered the doorway. As soon as Xenia entered, the stone door slowly closed and returned to its original state. The spacious cave suddenly became quiet. Li Ming turned his eyes and walked back and forth leisurely in the cave. There were not many equipment in the cave. In addition to the platform, there were only walls on both sides. Li Ming looked at the platform carefully again. There was indeed nothing else. This made Li Ming feel a little disappointed. He turned and came to the wall on the left. The red light flashed on the wall, and the characters came alive, as if they were living beings. This strange phenomenon immediately caught Li Ming's attention. He had not looked closely before and did not notice this strange point. Now it seems that these characters are indeed a bit strange. Is this a star? Moore's eyes suddenly widened a little, and he said in surprise. Li Ming listened to this and looked at it more attentively and activated the ability of wisdom. Sure enough, under the wisdom, the first character on the stone slab began to become clear. Li Ming took a deep breath and whispered, "This is actually." Li Ming's mind immediately sank into it. The first character had hundreds of strokes. Under the wisdom, hundreds of strokes were separated one after another, and each stroke was like a puzzle piece floating in Li Ming's mind. Li Ming focused on each stroke and began to freely piece them together. With the powerful spiritual civilization and the wisdom ability, these strokes slowly combined to form new characters. As soon as the new character appeared, Li Ming's face changed immediately, and he said in surprise, "It is a synthetic star." Chapter 124, Synthetic Star Glory. A complex character is split and then composed into many simple characters, which is equivalent to splitting and combining a word into hundreds of characters. Li Ming can already understand the recombined alien text and understand the content. The wall is a high-quality synthetic star book. Li Ming smiled and began to read it word by word. It is not a simple matter to split all the characters and then recombine them. There are hundreds of characters on the whole wall. This operation will inevitably take a long time. Fortunately, Xenia is not here, so Li Ming can calm down and study it slowly. As the text is disassembled and combined, lines of words begin to appear in Li Ming's mind. The content of the text is the ability of high-level synthetic star books. Synthesis and alchemy are limited by civilization levels. The content available for learning at different levels is also different. At the current civilization level of Li Ming, he can only learn limited synthesis capabilities, which are enough for Li Ming to use at present. As for other content that cannot be learned and understood, they are all recorded in his mind for future use. Star Glory Synthesis. Li Ming smiled and said silently, "This Star Glory Synthesis is exactly the ability that Li Ming needs right now." He called out the memory of this ability from his brain and began to study it carefully. The Synthesis Star Book has a detailed introduction to synthesis, including the use of energy, techniques, timing, operation, etc. It is not something that ordinary aliens can do to master the synthesis method and perform perfect operations. This requires day and night practice and years of accumulated experience. It often takes hundreds of years to become a synthesis master. Among all civilizations, except for spiritual civilization, only biological civilization is the rarest. There are generally two situations for the emergence of synthesis masters. One is extremely talented. After being proficient in the content of the star book, this kind of person only needs a few simple experiments to successfully master the ability of synthesis, but this kind of person is extremely rare and can be completely ignored. The second is cultivation. This is more common, but also very rare, because the cost of cultivation is extremely high. It almost does not exist in the outer system. Even planets like Philostar have not cultivated one. The so-called cultivation is to constantly collect materials and then let the biological civilization with such qualifications to synthesize them, accumulate experience through repeated operations, and eventually become a master. No matter which one, it is a rare existence. Li Ming does not have such a background, let alone any talent, but Li Ming has spiritual civilization. Under the blessing of this civilization, learning and recording any star book is easy. With the ability of wisdom, this learning advantage is no less than that of a highly talented existence, and even better. After the brain called out this memory, the white sphere in the brain also quickly integrated into it. The effect of this white sphere is extraordinary. With its addition, Li Ming can almost immediately become a master level existence. Others have spent their entire lives practicing, but Li Ming has already cultivated it in a short moment. After a light snort, Li Ming's eyes began to look around. Xenia has not returned yet. Isaac is guarding the entrance of the cave. Li Ming raised his hand and took out his star capsule. Then a white light flashed, and several things floated out. 2 star feathers, a star jade, and a star flame. 4 things slowly floated in front of Li Ming. Li Ming clenched his palms, and the star capsule was collected. At the same time, his left and right hands slowly raised, and powerful energy emerged on his hands. The energy wrapped Li Ming's hands, making his hands like two lamps. Under the operation of his hands, the four things began to slowly rotate. The top one was the star jade, which was misty, like a ball of fog. The left and right sides were a star feather, like a pair of wings. The bottom one was the star flame, which was shining with golden light and dazzling, as if a ball of fire was roasting the three things above. The white light in Li Ming's hands suddenly became brighter. It was because Li Ming increased the output of energy. Under the urging of this energy, the four things immediately gathered together. After the four things were compacted together, the white light in Li Ming's hands immediately became weak, which was because the output of energy was reduced. The increase and decrease of energy was timely and subtle, with skillful techniques and precise operation, which was completely a master's style. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and the white light on his hand began to brighten and dim. The flashing of light was Li Ming's precise control of energy, and the frequency of the flashing light did not have a fixed rhythm. Under this operation, the star flame became blurred little by little, and the star GUI continued to expand. After a while, the star GUI had completely disappeared, replaced by a grey mist, which wrapped the other three things in it. In the middle of this mist, the star flame gradually dispersed, and turned into golden light. The golden light wrapped the two star feathers like a flame. From a distance, it seemed as if there was light shining in the middle of a grey mist. Overall, the star GUI wrapped the star flame, and the star flame wrapped the star feather. Li Ming's hands continued to gather energy, and the white light kept flashing on his hands, sometimes strong and sometimes weak. It was under this pressure that the things began to dilute, and the star feather in the center began to break and disperse like ice crystals. The appearance of this scene made Li Ming smile slightly. It was just the same as what Li Ming had learned from the star book. All the objects were melted by the energy, and then gathered and condensed, and finally formed into a star. The three objects in front of Li Ming had all turned into tiny particles. After the corners of his mouth slightly raised, the white light of his hands became stronger. The three things began to gather towards the center. Under the urging of Li Ming's energy, these tiny particles gathered towards a point in the center at the speed of the naked eye. The more they gathered, the clearer the center became. At first, it was just a golden light spot, but as it continued to condense, the color began to change, gray, gold, purple, and constantly changing. Li Ming's two hands seemed to be kneading a marshmallow. The center had become stiff, and only the surroundings were slightly soft. The powerful energy was like a compression machine, constantly gathering these particles together. After a while, all the particles in front of Li Ming had completely disappeared, and only an egg-sized bead was floating in the air. Li Ming smiled slightly, raised his right hand, and held the bead in his hand, his eyes focused, staring at the bead tightly without blinking. This is the star glory. Li Ming's face was full of smiles, and his body was shaking with excitement. After all the hardships, he finally got this thing. Li Ming's right hand holding the star glory trembled slightly, and his eyes were full of excitement. The star glory does not have a fixed color. It is like a transparent egg. The soft light flows inside, and the color keeps changing. It is wonderful and weird. The most important thing is that the energy inside can be clearly sensed. This kind of thing only existed in memory fragments or imagination before. As a necessary thing for stable advancement, Li Ming fantasized about getting it more than once. He ran from the solar system to the Xianmang system. Now that he finally got it, Li Ming naturally had to take a closer look. The star glory, the star altar, and the nebula power are also very rich. Finally, I can advance to the 6th level civilization. The ecstasy in his heart was beyond words, and the excitement could not be expressed by any expression. Li Ming clenched his palms and narrowed his eyes slightly. Li Ming now wanted to advance to the 6th level immediately, but the current environment was not an absolutely safe place. According to Li Ming's previous experience of advancement, he still had to find a safe and secluded place as much as possible. Just as Li Ming was thinking about this, a creaking sound was heard. Li Ming turned around and saw a figure walking out from the side of the platform. It was Xenia. Xenia's face was not very good. She stared at Li Ming blankly, as if she was a little hesitant and worried. Finally, she opened her mouth and said, "Brother Li Ming, can you help me?" Oh. Li Ming was a little puzzled. After hesitating for a while, he smiled slightly and said, "Of course, if I can help you, there is no problem. Then come in with me," Xenia said, and her figure turned and returned directly to the side of the platform. Li Ming was puzzled, but he still walked over quickly. There was an open stone door on the right side of the platform. Li Ming walked in without hesitation. The space inside is not big. It is located directly behind the platform, about 10 square meters. A grey pipe extends out from the cave wall on the left that is connected to the outside platform. It looks like a pipe on the surface, but a closer look immediately reveals something unusual. The grey pipe, as thick as an arm, looks a bit like a withered vine, extending all the way to the cave wall on the right, as if a pipe is set up in the middle of the house. After connecting to the right cave wall, the pipe is divided into dozens of vines and deeply inserted into the right cave wall, and huge energy is constantly flowing in the pipe. Xenia came to the side of the pipe, pointed at the pipe with her finger, and said, "Brother Li Ming, can you help me cut it off?" Li Ming did not respond to the other party immediately, but used his wisdom ability to carefully sense the connection layout of the entire pipe. This sense made Li Ming's face change slightly. The pipe is rooted in the right cave wall in the form of more than a dozen roots, then passes through the left cave wall to enter the bottom of the outside platform, and finally flows into the stone bowl on the top of the platform. The entire energy chain was clearly presented in front of Li Ming. It was obvious that this grey pipe obtained huge energy through some substances deep in the cave wall, and then provided it to the stone bowl on the high platform outside through a special pipe. The stone bowl then released the red chain to bind the giant beast ice arc. If the energy pipe was disconnected, the powerful energy would fill the entire space. At the same time, the chain would also be disconnected after the stone bowl on the high platform outside lost its energy supply, and the giant beast ice arc would be completely released. Thinking of this, Li Ming's eyes widened a little. After glancing at Xenia, he whispered to himself, "This Xenia is actually going to untie the giant beast ice arc." Chapter 125, Advanced Civilization. Seeing through Xenia's intention, Li Ming began to think, if he really released Ice Arc, wouldn't he also be in trouble? Although Xenia could release her aura to protect herself, she couldn't control the other party after all. If an accident happened, it would be a matter of life and death. Looking around, the energy in the pipe aroused Li Ming's interest. Whether to release Ice Arc or not, Li Ming still had to consider carefully, but at the moment, Li Ming suddenly had a new idea and smiled at Xenia beside him. This pipe is full of pure energy, and it has been eroding this pipe for a long time, so this pipe is already very hard, and it is not something that can be easily cut off by any force. Li Ming said slowly, glancing at the grey pipe from time to time. Xenia felt a little disappointed when she heard this. She lowered her head slowly, looked at the pipe beside her, sighed slightly, and said, "You can't cut it off." Li Ming smiled lightly and said again, "It's not impossible to cut it off, but I need some time and methods." Upon hearing this, Xenia suddenly became alert. Her eyes immediately turned to Li Ming and said, "What method? Tell me quickly." Li Ming pretended to be thinking, hesitated for a while, and said, "If you want to cut it off completely, you first need to reduce the energy supply, and then I need to improve my strength. I still need your help with this." "Okay, tell me how to help you. As long as it can be cut off, I can do it," Xenia answered without thinking, expressing her urgent psychology completely. Li Ming nodded with satisfaction, raised his right hand, and took out something, which was the star furnace. Li Ming looked at the star furnace in his palm, his eyes suddenly turned, and he looked at Xenia again. After thinking for a while, he said seriously, "With the strength of my 5th level civilization, it is absolutely impossible to cut it off. This star furnace can control its energy supply first, and I need some time to advance to civilization and improve my strength, so I need a completely closed and safe place." Advanced to civilization? Xenia showed a surprised expression, opened her eyes wide, and said hesitantly, "Isn't that a very difficult and complicated thing? How is it possible?" Li Ming smiled slightly and said, "You don't have to worry about this. I have my own way." Xenia still looked puzzled, but glanced at the pipe next to her and nodded. Okay, but there is no closed place here. Li Ming looked at the other person's little head, and some information had appeared. After hesitating for a while, he came to the roots of the cave wall on the right, turned his right hand, and placed the star furnace on a root. I don't know what secret mechanism is inside this wall, but it actually contains huge energy. Li Ming's star furnace is placed here just to collect this energy. After the star furnace was placed, a little bit of blue light was released from the star furnace. The blue light formed a net and covered an area on the cave wall. At the same time, the powerful energy was captured by this blue light. Seeing this, Li Ming turned around and said, "You just look at this thing here. I will try it outside. If it succeeds, I will come back to help you cut off this pipe. During this period, you'd better not go out so as not to have an accident." Although Xenia was of a lower level, she still knew something about the advancement of civilization. She kept looking at Li Ming with her eyes, nodded slightly and didn't say anything more. Li Ming turned around and left the room with satisfaction. The stone door slowly closed, and Li Ming came to the side of the platform and slowly leaned over to sit down. Li Ming was not in a hurry to operate anything. He glanced at Moore on his shoulder with his eyes and whispered, "Do you want to avoid it?" Moore snorted disdainfully, flapped his wings, and flew away from Li Ming's shoulder. Logically speaking, it is really dangerous to advance in such a place, because the surroundings are full of uncertain factors. Isaac outside, Xenia inside, and even more. If an accident happens during the advancement, the consequences will be extremely serious. However, according to the information Li Ming has, if he does not advance, he can't even get out of this cave. Those 6th level mentors outside want his life. Therefore, even if there are some risks, Li Ming will try it. After careful consideration, Li Ming turned his right hand, and the star altar and star glory appeared. The star altar is a round stone platform, like a cushion, but the material is some rare meteorite. Li Ming moved his body to the star altar, and sat down slowly. As soon as he sat down, Li Ming noticed something strange. This star altar is indeed extraordinary. It's like sitting under a vortex suction cup, and the energy of the whole body is constantly condensed. This effect is also powerful. After all, when advancing, the energy overflows. In addition to the damage to the body, it will also cause unnecessary environmental changes. With the star altar, it can also suppress some. Under the control of Li Ming's energy, Xingqiao slowly floated to the top of Li Ming's head. A strange force enveloped Li Ming. This force was like a waterfall, constantly washing Li Ming's body, diluting the energy in the body, and its effect was far greater than that of Xington. However, these two things can perfectly fit and interact with each other, and the suppression and dilution of energy in the human body is extreme. Before the advancement, the effectiveness of the two things has been fully demonstrated, which also made Li Ming more relieved. His right hand turned again, and 5 groups of translucent things floated out. They were the power of 5 nebulae. Li Ming slowly closed his eyes and devoted himself to it, controlling everything with his own consciousness. Bang! A muffled sound came from deep in the brain, and a world immediately appeared in his head. The familiar feeling had emerged, and the familiar illusion appeared all around. The dark night sky was full of stardust. Li Ming was like a giant sitting in the vacuum universe. He could see the shining stars in the distance, and 5 groups of nebulae were rotating in front of Li Ming's eyes. In reality, Li Ming's eyes were closed, but in the illusion, he opened his eyes wide. Li Ming was no longer immersed in the distant and beautiful starry sky as before. He stared at the 5 nebulae in front of him, opened his mouth, and a suction force came out from the depths of his throat. After the nebulae rotated in front of him, they entered Li Ming's mouth one by one. The feeling did not change at all, and they went down his throat like raw eggs. The power of the 5 nebulae was like 5 fireballs, and began to heat up and expand in the abdomen. However, under the use of the star altar, the power of the 5 nebulae began to rotate and merge, and the powerful energy also maintained a uniform motion under the gravity of the star altar. If it were not for the star altar, these powerful energies would quickly devour Li Ming's body and destroy it, causing irresistible losses. The gravity of the star altar was also under Li Ming's control. After all, the energy of the 5 nebulae had to be slowly transported to the whole body. When the gravity of the star altar was weakened by Li Ming, the energy gradually entered various parts of Li Ming's body like an expanding sphere, and the use of the star glory was fully exerted at this time. Xingqiao diluted and suppressed the energy, allowing Li Ming's body to slowly accept and adapt. The next step was to absorb the energy. This process was relatively slow. If the absorption progress was accelerated recklessly, the pain in the body would also increase. Li Ming used his tolerance as a benchmark and accelerated the process as much as possible. After all, the safety of such a place was insufficient, so it would be best to finish it early. While Li Ming was doing this, Moore on the high platform kept looking at Li Ming with his eyes, revealing that he had other thoughts. This guy actually advanced in such a place. If something unexpected happened, Moore sighed slightly, and his expression became complicated. Although I don't like this low-level creature very much, but his temper is quite compatible with mine. Even if I want to get rid of him, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future, so I won't take advantage of him now. He thought so in his mind, but his expression was extremely complicated, a little tangled, and a little hesitant. But low-level creatures are really too stupid. Forget it, forget it. Still unwilling to follow him? Just bear with it, maybe it will get better in the future. Moore muttered to himself in his mind, as if two people were arguing, making Moore feel torn. This ideological struggle finally made Moore's head sink, and he sighed for a long time, closing his eyes and not looking at Li Ming. At this time, the outside of the cave was already in chaos. The giant beast Isaac slowly lay on the ground, supporting his chin with one hand and tapping the ground with the other hand, with a leisurely and comfortable posture. But outside the area controlled by Isaac, the people of the four major tribes each held stardust weapons, staring at each other fiercely, and had been fighting for several rounds. Jeremy, it's useless for you aliens to stand on Clean's side. As long as Clean destroys the light medicine and our tamed beasts, it will be your aliens next. Fitch said coldly as he looked at the 5 people opposite, and these 5 people were the 3 people including the dead medicine Clean and the alien Jeremy. The Linoop on the field has been divided into 3 groups. One group of 2 people for beast taming, one group of 1 person for light medicine, and one group of 5 for death medicine and alien species. The 3 parties looked at each other. The situation was delicate and each of them had their own ulterior motives. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.